Part 4. Sadie and the General. Chapter 14. The memorial assembly was held at the end of the new school year's first day, and if one can measure success by damp hankies, the show Sadie and I put together was boffo. I'm sure it was cathartic for the kids, and I think Miss Mimi herself would have enjoyed it. "Sarcastic people tend to be marshmallows underneath the armor," she once told me. "I'm no different." The teachers held it together through most of the eulogies. It was Mike who started to get to them with his calm, heartfelt recitation from Proverbs 31. Then, during the slideshow with the accompanying schmaltz from West Side Story, the faculty lost it too. I found Coach Borman particularly entertaining, with tears streaming down his red cheeks and large quacking sobs emerging from his massive chest. Denholm's football guru reminded me of everybody's second favorite cartoon duck, Baby Huey. I whispered this observation to Sadie as we stood beside the big screen with its marching images of Ms. Mimi. She was crying too, but had to step off the stage and into the wings as laughter first fought with and then overcame her tears. Safely back in the shadows, she looked at me reproachfully and then gave me the finger. I decided I deserved it. I wondered if Ms. Mimi would still think Sadie and I were getting along famously. I thought she probably would. I picked 12 angry men for the fall play, accidentally on purpose neglecting to inform the Samuel French Company that I intended to retitle our version The Jury so I could cast some girls. I would hold tryouts in late October and start rehearsals on November 13th. After the Lions' last regular season football game. I had my eye on Vince Knowles for juror number 8, the holdout who'd been played by Henry Fonda in the movie, and Mike Kozloff for what I considered the best part in the show, bullying abrasive juror number 3. But I had begun to focus on a more important show, one that made the Frank Dunning affair look like a paltry vaudeville skit by comparison. Call this one Jake and Lee. In Dallas. If things went well, it would be a tragedy in one act. I had to be ready to go on stage when the time came, and that meant starting early. On the 6th of October, the Denholm Lions won their 5th football game on their way to an undefeated season that would be dedicated to Vince Knowles, the boy who'd played George in Of Mice and Men, and who would never get a chance to act in the George Amberson version of 12 Angry Men. But more of that later. It was the start of a 3-day weekend because the Monday following was Columbus Day. I drove to Dallas on the holiday. Most businesses were open, and my first stop was one of the pawn shops on Greenville Avenue. I told the little man behind the counter that I wanted to buy the cheapest wedding ring he had in stock. I walked out with an $8 band of gold, at least it looked like gold, on the third finger of my left hand. Then I drove downtown to a place on Lower Main Street I'd bird-dogged in the Dallas Yellow Pages, Silent Mike's Satellite Electronics. There I was greeted by a trim little man who wore horn-rimmed glasses and a weirdly futuristic button on his vest. "Trust nobody," it said. "Are you Silent Mike?" I asked. "Yep." "And are you truly silent?" He smiled. "Depends on who's listening." "Let's assume nobody," I said, and told him what I wanted. It turned out I could have saved my $8, because he had no interest at all in my supposedly cheating wife. It was the equipment I wanted to buy that interested the proprietor of Satellite Electronics. On that subject, he was loquacious Mike. "Mister, they may have gear like that on whatever planet you come from, but we sure don't have it here." That stirred a memory of Ms. Mimi comparing me to the alien visitor in The Day the Earth Stood Still. "I don't know what you mean." "You want a small wireless listening device? Fine. I got a bunch in that glass case right over there to your left. They're called transistor radios. I stock both Motorola and GE, but the Japanese make the best ones." He stuck out his lower lip and blew a lock of hair off his forehead. "Ain't that a kick in the behind?" We beat 'em 15 years ago by bombing 2 of their cities to radioactive dust, but do they die? No. They hide in their holes until the dust settles, then come crawling back out armed with circuit boards and soldering irons instead of Nambu machine guns. By 1985, they'll own the world. The part of it I live in, anyway. So you can't help me? What are you kidding? Sure I can. Silent Mike McKeekern's always happy to help fill a customer's electronic needs. But it'll cost. I'd be willing to pay quite a bit. It could save me even more when I get that cheating bitch into divorce court. Uh-huh. Wait here a minute while I get something out of the back. And turn that sign in the door over to closed, would you? I'm going to show you something that's probably not... Well, maybe it is legal, but who knows? Is Silent Mike McKeekern an attorney? I'm guessing not. My guide to 60s-era electronica reappeared with a weird-looking gadget in one hand and a small cardboard box in the other. The printing on the box was in Japanese. The gadget looked like a dildo for pixie chicks, mounted on a black plastic disc. The disc was 3 inches thick and about the diameter of a quarter, with a spray of wires coming out of it. He put it on the counter. This is an Echo, manufactured right here in town, son. If anyone can beat the sons of Nippon at their own game, it's us. Electronics is going to replace banking in Dallas by 1970. Mark my words. He crossed himself, pointed skyward, and added, God bless Texas. I picked the gadget up. What exactly is an Echo when it's at home with its feet up on the hassock? The closest thing to the kind of bug you described to me that you're going to get. It's small because it doesn't have any vacuum tubes and doesn't run on batteries. It runs on ordinary AC house current. You plug it into the wall? Sure, why not? Your wife and her boyfriend can look at it and say, how nice, someone bugged the place while we were out. Let's have a nice, noisy shag, then talk over all our private business. He was a geek, all right. Still, patience is a virtue, and I needed what I needed. What do you do with it, then? He tapped the disc. This goes inside the base of a lamp. Not a floor lamp unless you're interested in recording the mice running around inside the baseboards, you dig? A table lamp, so it's up where people talk. He brushed the wires. The red and yellow ones connect to the lamp cord. Lamp cord's plugged into the wall. The bug's dead until someone turns on the lamp. When they do, bingo, you're off to the races. This other thing is the mic? Yep. And for American-made, it's a good one. Now, you see the other 2 wires, the blue and green ones? Uh-huh. He opened the cardboard box with the Japanese writing on it and took out a reel-to-reel recorder. It was bigger than a pack of City's Winstons, but not by much. Those wires hook up to this. Base unit goes in the lamp, recorder goes in a bureau drawer, or maybe under your wife's scanties, or drill a little hole in the wall and put it in the closet. The recorder also draws power from the lamp cord. Naturally. Could I get 2 of these Echoes? I could get you 4 if you wanted. Might take a week, though. 2 will be fine. How much? Stuff like this ain't cheap. A pair'd run you $140, best I can do, and it would have to be a cash deal. He spoke with a regret that suggested we'd been having a nice little techno dream for ourselves, but now the dream was almost over. How much more would it cost me to have you do the installation? I saw his alarm and hastened to dispel it. I don't mean the actual black bag job, nothing like that. Just to put the bugs in a couple of lamps and hook up the tape recorders. Could you do that? Of course I could, Mr. Let's say Mr. Doe. John Doe. His eyes sparkled as I imagined E. Howard Hunt's would when he first beheld the challenge that was the Watergate Hotel. Good name. Thanks, and it would be good to have a couple of options with the wires. Something short, if I can place it close by, something longer if I need to hide it in a closet or on the other side of a wall. I can do that, but you don't want more than 10 feet or the sound turns to mud. Also, the more wire you use, the greater the chance that someone will find it. Even an English teacher could understand that. How much for the whole deal? 180? He looked ready to haggle, but I didn't have the time or the inclination. I put 520s down on the counter and said, "You get the rest when I pick them up, but first we test them out and make sure they work, agreed?" "Yeah, fine." One other thing, get used lamps, kind of grungy. Grungy? Like they were picked up at a yard sale or a flea market for a quarter apiece. After you direct a few plays, counting the ones I'd worked on at LHS, Of Mice and Men had been my 5th. You learn a few things about set decoration. The last thing I wanted was someone stealing a bug-loaded lamp from a semi-furnished apartment. For a moment he looked puzzled, then a complicitous smile dawned on his face. "I get it. Realism." "That's the plan, Stan." I started for the door, then came back, leaned my forearms on the transistor radio display case and looked into his eyes. I can't swear that he saw the man who had killed Frank Dunning, but I can't say for sure that he didn't either. "You're not going to talk about this, are you?" "No, of course not." He zipped 2 fingers across his lips. "That's the way," I said. "When?" "Give me a few days." "I'll come back next Monday. What time do you close?" 5. I calculated the distance from Jody to Dallas and said, "An extra 20 if you stay open until 7. It's the soonest I can make it. That work for you?" "Yeah." "Good. Have everything ready." "I will. Anything else?" "Yeah. Why the hell do they call you Silent Mike?" I was hoping he'd say because I can keep a secret, but he didn't. "When I was a kid, I thought that Christmas carol was about me. It just kind of stuck." I didn't ask, but halfway back to my car it came to me, and I started to laugh. Silent Mike. Holy Mike. Sometimes the world we live in is a truly weird place. When Lee and Marina returned to the United States, they'd live in a sad procession of low-rent apartments, including the one in New Orleans I'd already visited, but based on Al's notes, I thought there were only 2 I needed to focus on. One was at 214 West Neely Street in Dallas. The other was in Fort Worth, and that was where I went after my visit to Silent Mike's. I had a map of the city, but still had to ask directions 3 times. In the end, it was an elderly black woman clerking at a mom and pop who pointed me the right way. When I finally found what I was looking for, I wasn't surprised that it had been hard to locate. The ass end of Mercedes Street was unpaved hardpan, lined with crumbling houses little better than sharecroppers' shacks. It spilled into a huge, mostly empty parking lot where tumbleweeds blew across the crumbling asphalt. Beyond the lot was the back of a cinder block warehouse. Printed on it in whitewashed letters, 10 feet tall, was "Property of Montgomery Ward," and "Trespassers will be prosecuted," and "Police take note." The air stank of cracked petroleum from the direction of Odessa Midland, and raw sewage much closer at hand. The sound of rock and roll spilled from open windows. I heard the DeVelles, Johnny Burnett, Lee Dorsey, Chubby Checker, and that was in the first 40 yards or so. Women were hanging clothes on rusty whirligigs. They were all wearing smocks that had probably been purchased at Zayre's or Mammoth Mart, and they all appeared to be pregnant. A filthy little boy and an equally filthy little girl stood on a cracked clay driveway and watched me go by. They were holding hands and looked too much alike not to be twins. The boy, naked except for a single sock, was holding a cap pistol. The girl was wearing a saggy diaper below a Mickey Mouse Club t-shirt. She was clutching a plastic baby doll, as filthy as she was. Two bare-chested men were throwing a football back and forth between their respective yards, both of them with cigarettes hanging from the corners of their mouths. Beyond them, a rooster and two bedraggled chickens pecked in the dust near a scrawny dog that was either sleeping or dead. I pulled up in front of 2703, the place to which Lee would bring his wife and daughter when he could no longer stand Marguerite Oswald's pernicious brand of smother love. Two concrete strips led up to a bald patch of oil-stained ground where there would have been a garage in a better part of town. The wasteland of crabgrass that passed for a lawn was littered with cheap plastic toys. A little girl in ragged pink shorts was kicking a soccer ball repeatedly against the side of the house. Each time it hit the wooden siding, she said, "Jumba!" A woman with her hair in large blue rollers and a cigarette plugged in her gob shoved her head at the window and shouted, "You keep doing that, Rosette. I'm going to come out and beat you snotty." Then she saw me. "What you want?" "If it's a bill, I can't help you. My husband does all that. He got work today." "It's not a bill," I said. Rosette kicked the soccer ball at me with a snarl that became a reluctant smile when I caught it with the side of my foot and booted it gently back. "I just wanted to speak to you for a second." "Oh, y'all gotta wait then. I ain't decent." Her head disappeared. I waited. Rosette kicked the soccer ball high and wide this time. "Chamba!" But I managed to catch it on one palm before it hit the house. "Ain't supposed to use your hands, dirty old sumbitch," she said. "That's a penalty." "Rosette, what I told you about that goddamn mouth?" Moms came out on the stoop, securing a filmy yellow scarf over her rollers. It made them look like cocooned insects, the kind that might be poisonous when they hatched. "Dirty old fucking sumbitch!" Rosette shrieked, and then scampered up Mercedes Street in the direction of the Monkey Ward warehouse, kicking her soccer ball and laughing maniacally. "What you want?" Mom's was 22, going on 50. Several of her teeth were gone, and she had the fading remains of a black eye. "Want to ask you some questions?" I said. "What makes my business your business?" I took out my wallet and offered her a $5 bill. "Ask me no questions, and I'll tell you no lies." "You ain't from around here. You sound like a Yankee." "Do you want this money or not, missus?" "Depends on the questions. I ain't telling you my goddamn bra size." "I want to know how long you've been here for a start." "This place? 6 weeks, I guess. Harry thought he might catch on at the Monkey Ward warehouse, but they ain't hiring. So he went on over to Manpower. You know where that is?" "Day labor?" "Yeah, and he working with a bunch of niggers. $9 a day working with a bunch of goddamn niggers side of the road. He says it's like being a West Texas correctional again." "How much rent do you pay?" $50 a month." "Furnished?" "Semi. Well, you could say. Got a goddamn bed and a goddamn gas stove gonna kill us all, most likely. And I ain't taking you in, so don't ask. I don't know you from goddamn Adam." "Did it come with lamps and such?" "You crazy, mister." "Did it?" "Yeah, couple. One that works and one that didn't. I ain't staying here, be goddamned if I will. He tell how he don't want to move back in with my mama down Moselle, but tough titty said the kitty. I ain't staying here. You smell this place?" "Yes, ma'am." "That ain't nothing but shit, Sonny Jim. Not cat shit, not dog shit. That's people shit. Work with niggers, that's one thing, but live like one, no, sir. You done?" I wasn't quite, although I wished I were. I was disgusted by her, and disgusted with myself for daring to judge. She was a prisoner of her time, her choices, and this shit-smelling street. But it was the rollers under the yellow headscarf that I kept looking at, fat blue bugs waiting to hatch. Nobody stays there for long, I guess? On Sadie Street? She waved her cigarette at the hard pan leading to the deserted parking lot and the vast warehouse filled with nice things she would never own. At the elbow-to-elbow shacks with their steps of crumbling cinder block and their broken windows blocked up with pieces of cardboard. At the roiling kids, at the old rust-eaten Fords and Hudsons and Studebaker Larks. At the unforgiving Texas sky. Then she uttered a terrible laugh filled with amusement and despair. "Mister, this is a bus stop on the road to nowhere. Me and Bratty Sue's sailing back to Moselle. If Harry won't go with us, we'll sail without him." I took the map out of my hip pocket, tore off a strip, and scribbled my Jody telephone number on it. Then I added another $5 bill. I held them out to her. She looked, but didn't take. "What I want your telephone number for? I ain't got no goddamn phone. That there ain't no DFW change anyway. That's goddamn long distance." "Call me when you get ready to move that. That's all I want. You call me and say, 'Mister, this is Rosette's mama and we're moving.' That's all it is." I could see her calculating. It didn't take her long. $10 was more than her husband would make working all day in the hot Texas sun. Because Manpower knew from nothing about time and a half on holidays, and this would be $10 he knew from nothing about. "Give me another 75 cents, she said, "for the long distance." "Here, take $1, live a little. And don't forget." "I won't." "No, you don't want to. Because if you forgot, I might just be apt to find my way to your husband and tattle. This is important business, missus. To me it is. What's your name, anyway?" "Ivy Templeton." I stood there in the dirt and the weeds, smelling shit, half-cooked oil, and the big farty aroma of natural gas. "Mister? What's wrong with you? You come over all funny." "Nothing," I said, and maybe it was nothing. Templeton is far from an uncommon name. Of course, a man can talk himself into anything if he tries hard enough. I'm walking, talking proof of that. "What's your name?" "Puddentane," I said. "Ask me again and I'll tell you the same." At this touch of grammar school raillery, she finally cracked a smile. "You call me, missus." "Yeah, okay. Go on now. You was to run over that little hell bitch of mine on your way out? You'd probably be doing me a favor." I drove back to Jody and found a note thumbtacked to my door. "George, would you call me? I need a favor. Sadie." And that's the trouble. Which meant exactly what? I went inside to call her and find out. Coach Borman's mother, who lived in an Abilene nursing home, had broken her hip, and this coming Saturday was the DCHS Sadie Hawkins dance. Coach talked me into chaperoning the dance with him. He said, and I quote, "How can you resist going to a dance that's practically named after you?" Just last week this was, and like a fool, I agreed. Now he's going down to Abilene, and where does that leave me? Chaperoning 200 sex-crazed 16-year-olds doing the twist and the filly. I don't think so. What if some of the boys bring beer? I thought it would be amazing if they didn't, but felt it best not to say so. Or what if there's a fight in the parking lot? Ellie Doherty said a bunch of boys from Henderson crashed the dance last year, and 2 of their kids and 2 of ours had to go to the hospital. George, can you help me out here, please? Have I just been Sadie Hawkinsed by Sadie Dunhill? I was grinning. The idea of going to the dance with her did not exactly fill me with gloom. Don't joke, it's not funny. Sadie, I'd be happy to go with you. Are you going to bring me a corsage? I'd bring you a bottle of champagne if that's what it took. She considered this. Well, no, not on my salary. A bottle of cold duck, though. Doors open at 7:30? Actually, I knew they did. The posters were up all over the school. Right. And it's just a record hop. No band. That's good. Why? Live bands can cause problems. I shapped a dance once where the drummer sold homebrew beer at intermission. That was a pleasant experience. Were there fights? She sounded horrified. Also fascinated. Nope, but there was a whole lot of puking. The stuff was spunky. This was in Florida? It had been at Lisbon High in 2009. So I told her yes, in Florida. I also told her I'd be happy to co-chaperone the hop. Thank you so much, George. My pleasure, ma'am. And it absolutely was. The pep club was in charge of the Sadie Hawkins, and they'd done a bang-up job. Lots of crepe streamers wafting down from the gymnasium rafters. Silver and gold, of course. Lots of ginger ale punch, lemon snap cookies, and red velvet cupcakes provided by the future homemakers of America. The art department, small but dedicated, contributed a cartoon mural that showed the immortal Miss Hawkins herself, chasing after the eligible bachelors of Dogpatch. Mattie Shaw and Mike's girlfriend, Bobby Jill, did most of the work, and they were justifiably proud. I wondered if they still would be 7 or 8 years from now, when the first wave of women's libbers started burning their bras and demonstrating for full reproductive rights. Not to mention wearing T-shirts that said things like, "I am not property," and "A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle." The night's DJ and master of ceremonies was Donald Bellingham, a sophomore. He arrived with a totally ginchy record collection in not one, but 2 Samsonite suitcases. With my permission, Sadie just looked bewildered, he hooked up his Webcore phonograph and his dad's preamp to the school's PA system. The gym was big enough to provide natural reverb, and after a few preliminary feedback shrieks, he got a booming sound that was awesome. Although born in Jody, Donald was a permanent resident of Rockville, in the state of Daddy Cool. He wore pink-rimmed specs with thick lenses, belt in the back slacks, and saddle shoes so grotesquely square they were authentically crazy, man. His face was an exploding zit factory below a Brill cream-loaded Bobby Rydell duck's ass. He looked like he might get his first kiss from a real-live girl around the age of 42. But he was fast and funny with the mic and his record collection, which he called the Stack of Wax. And Donnie B's Round Mound of Sound was, as previously noted, the ginchiest. Let's kickstart this party with a blast from the past, a rock and roll relic from the grooveyard of cool, a golden gasser, a platter that matters. Move your feet to the real gone beat of Danny and the Juniors. At the hop, nuked the gym. The dance started as most of them do in the early 60s, just the girls jitterbugging with the girls. Feet in penny loafers flew, petticoats swirled. After a while, though, the floor started to fill up with boy-girl couples. For the fast dances, at least, more current stuff like Hit the Road Jack and Quarter to Three. Not many of the kids would have made the cut on Dancing with the Stars, but they were young and enthusiastic, and obviously having a ball. It made me happy to see them. Later, if Donnie B. didn't have the good sense to lower the lights a bit, I'd do it myself. Sadie was nervous at first, ready for trouble, but these kids had just come to have fun. There were no invading hordes from Henderson or any other school. She saw that and began to loosen up a little. After about 40 minutes of nonstop music and 4 red velvet cupcakes, I leaned toward Sadie and said, "Time for Warden Amberson to do his first circuit of the building and make sure no one in the exercise yard is engaged in inappropriate behavior. Do you want me to come with you? I want you to keep an eye on the punch bowl. If any young man approaches it with a bottle of anything, even cough syrup, I want you to threaten him with electrocution or castration, whichever you think might be more effective." She leaned back against the wall and laughed until tears sparkled in the corners of her eyes. "Get out of here, George. You're awful." I went. I was glad I'd made her laugh. But even after 3 years, it was easy to forget how much more effect sexually tinged jokes have in the land of ago. I caught a couple making out in one of the more shadowy nooks on the east side of the gym. He prospecting inside her sweater, she apparently trying to suck his lips off. When I tapped the young prospector on the shoulder, they leapt apart. "Save it for the bluffs after the dance," I said. "For now, go on back to the gym. Walk slow, cool off, get some punch." They went, she buttoning her sweater, he walking slightly bent over in that well-known male adolescent gait known as the blue ball scuttle. 24 red fireflies winked from behind the metal shop. I waved, and a couple of the kids in the smoking area waved back. I poked my head around the east corner of the wood shop and saw something I didn't like. Mike Coslaw, Jim Ledoux, and Vince Knowles were huddled there, passing something back and forth. I grabbed it and heaved it over the chain-link fence before they even knew I was there. Jim looked momentarily startled, then gave me his lazy football hero smile. "Hello to you too, Mr. A." "Spare me, Jim. I'm not some girl you're trying to charm out of her panties, and I'm most assuredly not your coach." He looked shocked and a little scared, but I saw no offended sense of entitlement in his face. I think that if this had been one of the big Dallas schools, there might have been. Vince had backed away a step. Mike stood his ground, but looked downcast and embarrassed. No, it was more than embarrassment. It was outright shame. "A bottle at a record hop?" I said. "It's not that I expect you to stick to all the rules, but why would you be so stupid when it comes to violating them? Jimmy, you get caught drinking and kicked off the football team, what happens to your Bama scholarship?" "Probably get redshirted, I guess," he said. "That's all." "Right, and sit out a year. Actually have to make grades. Same with you, Mike. And you'd get kicked out of the drama club. Do you want that?" "No, sir." Hardly more than a whisper. "Do you, Vince?" "No, Mr. A, absolutely, Nitsy. Are we still going to do the jury one? Because if we are, don't you know enough to shut up when a teacher's scolding you?" "Yes, sir, Mr. A." "You boys don't get a pass from me next time, but this is your lucky night. What you get tonight is a valuable piece of advice. Do not fuck up your futures. Not over a pint of 5-Star at a school dance you won't even remember a year from now. Do you understand that?" "Yes, sir," Mike said. "I'm sorry." "Me too," Vince said. "Absolutely," and crossed himself, grinning. Some of them are just built that way, and maybe the world needs a cadre of smartasses to liven things up, who knows. "Jim?" "Yes, sir," he said. "Please don't tell my daddy." "Nope, this is between us." I looked them over. "You boys will find plenty of places to drink next year at college, but not at our school, you hear me?" This time they all said yes, sir. "Now go back inside, drink some punch, and rinse the smell of whiskey off your breath." They went. I gave them time, then followed at a distance, head down, hands stuffed deep in pockets, thinking hard. Not at our school, I had said. Ours. "Come and teach," Mimi had said. "That's what you were meant to do." 2011 had never seemed more distant than it did then. Hell, Jake Epping had never seemed so distant. A growling tenor sax was blowing in a party-lit gym deep in the heart of Texas. A sweet breeze carried it across the night. A drummer was laying down an insidious off-your-seat and on-your-feet shuffle. I think that's when I decided I was never going back. The growling sax and hoochie-coochie drummer were backing a group called the Diamonds. The song was The Stroll. The kids weren't doing that dance, though. Not quite. The Stroll was the first step Christy and I learned when we started going to Thursday night dance classes. It's a 2x2 dance, a kind of icebreaker where each couple jives down an aisle of clapping guys and girls. What I saw when I came back into the gym was different. Here, the boys and the girls came together, turned in each other's arms as if waltzing, then separated again, ending up across from where they had been. When they were apart, their feet went back on their heels and their hips swayed forward, a move that was both charming and sexy. As I watched from beside the snack table, Mike, Jim, and Vince joined the guys' side. Vince didn't have much. To say he danced like a white boy would be an insult to white boys everywhere. But Jim and Mike moved like the athletes they were, which is to say, with unconscious grace. Pretty soon, most of the girls on the other side were watching them. "I was starting to worry about you," Sadie shouted over the music. "Is everything all right out there?" "Fine," I shouted back. "What's that dance?" "The Madison. They've been doing it on Bandstand all month. Want me to teach you?" "Lady," I said, taking her by the arm, "I'm going to teach you." The kids saw us coming and made room, clapping and shouting. "Way to go, Mr. A!" and "Show 'em how you work, Miss Dunhill." Sadie laughed and tightened the elastic holding her ponytail. Color mounted high in her cheeks, making her more than pretty. She got back on her heels, clapping her hands and shaking her shoulders with the other girls, then came forward into my arms, her eyes turned up to mine. I was glad I was tall enough for her to do that. We turned like a wind-up bride and groom on a wedding cake, then came apart. I dipped low and spun on my toes with my hands held out like Al Jolson singing Mammy. This brought more applause and some pre-Beatles shrieks from the girls. I wasn't showing off. Okay, maybe a little. Mostly, I was just happy to be dancing. It had been too long. The song ended, the growling sax fading off into that rock and roll eternity our young DJ was pleased to call the groove yard, and we started to walk off the floor. "God, that was fun," she said. She took my arm and squeezed it. "You're fun." Before I could answer, Donald blared out through the PA, "In honor of two chaperones who can actually dance, a first in the history of our school, here's a blast from the past, gone from the charts but not from our hearts, a platter that matters, straight from my own Daddy-O's record collection, which he doesn't know I brought, and if any of you cool cats tell him, I'm in trouble. Dig it, all you steady rockers. This is how they did it when Mr. A and Miss D were in high school." They all turned to look at us, and, well, you know how when you're out at night and you see the edge of a cloud light up a bright gold, you know the moon is going to come out in a second or two. That was the feeling I had right then, standing among the gently swaying crepe streamers in the Denholm Gymnasium. I knew what he was going to play. I knew we were going to dance to it. And I knew how we were going to dance. Then it came, that smooth brass intro. Glenn Miller, In the Mood. Sadie reached behind her and pulled the elastic, releasing the ponytail. She was still laughing and beginning to hip sway just a little bit. Her hair slipped smoothly from one shoulder to the other. "Can you swing?" Raising my voice to be heard over the music, knowing she could, knowing she would. "Do you mean like the Lindy Hop?" she asked. "That's what I mean." "Well, go, Miss Dunhill," one of the girls said. "We want to see it." And two of her friends pushed Sadie toward me. She hesitated. I did another spin and held up my hands. The kids cheered as we moved out on the floor. They gave us room. I pulled her toward me, and after the smallest of hesitations, she spun, first to the left and then to the right, the A-line of the jumper she was wearing giving her just enough room to cross her feet as she went. It was the Lindy variation, Richie from the Ditchy, and Bevy from the Levee had been learning that day in the fall of 1958. It was the Hellzapoppin'. Of course it was, because the past harmonizes. I brought her to me by our clasped hands, then let her go back. We separated. Then, like people who'd practiced these moves for months, possibly to a slowed-down record in a deserted picnic area, we bent and kicked, first to the left, then to the right. The kids laughed and cheered. They had formed a clapping circle around us in the middle of the polished floor. We came together and she twirled like a hopped-up ballerina beneath our linked hands. Now you squeeze to tell me left or right. The light squeeze came on my right hand as if the thought had summoned it, and she whirled back like a propeller, her hair flying out in a fan that gleamed first red, then blue in the lights. I heard several girls gasp. I caught her and went down on one heel with her bent over my arm, hoping like hell that I wouldn't pop my knee. I didn't. I came up. She came with me. She went out, then came back into my arms. We danced under the lights. Dancing is life. The hop ended at 11, but I didn't turn the sunliner into Sadie's driveway until midnight on Sunday morning. One of the things nobody tells you about the glamorous job of chaperoning teenage dances is that the chaps are the ones who have to make sure everything's picked up and locked away once the music ends. Neither of us said much on the way back. Although Donald played several other tempting big band jump tunes and the kids pestered us to swing dance again, we declined. Once was memorable. Twice would have been indelible. Maybe not such a good thing in a small town. For me, it already was indelible. I couldn't stop thinking about the feel of her in my arms or her quick breath on my face. I cut the engine and turned to her. Now she'll say, "Thank you for bailing me out," or "Thanks for a lovely evening," and that'll be that. But she didn't say either of those things. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me. Hair on her shoulders, top 2 buttons of the man's Oxford cloth shirt beneath the jumper undone. Earrings gleaming. Then we were together, first fumbling, then holding on tight. It was kissing, but it was more than kissing. It was like eating when you've been hungry or drinking when you've been thirsty. I could smell her perfume and her clean sweat under the perfume, and I could taste tobacco, faint but still pungent, on her lips and tongue. Her fingers slipped through my hair, one pinky tickling for just a moment in the cup of my ear and making me shiver, then locked at the back of my neck. Her thumbs were moving, stroking bare skin at the nape that once in another life would have been covered by hair. I slipped my hand first beneath and then around the fullness of her breast, and she murmured, "Oh, thank you. I thought I was going to fall." "My pleasure," I said, and squeezed gently. We necked for maybe 5 minutes, breathing harder as the caresses grew bolder. The windshield of my Ford steamed up. Then she pushed me away, and I saw her cheeks were wet. When in God's name had she started to cry? "George, I'm sorry," she said. "I can't. I'm too scared." Her jumper was in her lap, revealing her garters, the hem of her slip, the lacy froth of her panties. She pulled the skirt down to her knees. I guessed it was being married, and even if the marriage was busted, it still mattered. This was the mid-20th century, not the early 21st. Or maybe it was the neighbors. The houses looked dark and fast asleep, but you couldn't tell for sure, and in small towns, new preachers and new teachers are always interesting topics of conversation. It turned out I was wrong on both counts, but there was no way I could have known. "Sadie, you don't have to do anything you don't want to. You don't understand. It's not that I don't want to. That's not why I'm scared. It's because I never have." Before I could say anything else, she was out of the car and running for the house, fumbling in her purse for her key. She didn't look back. I got home at 20 to 1. walking from the garage to the house in my own version of the blue ball scuttle. I had no more than turned on the kitchen light when the phone began to ring. 1961 is 40 years from caller ID, but only one person would be calling me at such an hour and after such a night. "George, it's me." She sounded composed, but her voice was thick. She had been crying, and hard from the sound. "Hi, Sadie. You never gave me a chance to thank you for a lovely time, during the dance and after. I had a good time, too. It's been so long since I danced. I'm almost afraid to tell you who I learned to Lindy with." "Well," I said, "I learned with my ex-wife. I'm guessing you might have learned with your estranged husband?" Except it wasn't a guess. It was how these things went. I was no longer surprised by it. But if I told you I ever got used to that eerie chiming of events, I'd be lying. "Yes." Her tone was flat. "Him. John Clayton of the Savannah Claytons. And estranged is just the right word, because he's a very strange man." "How long have you been married?" "Forever and a day. If you want to call what we had a marriage, that is." She laughed. It was Ivy Templeton's laugh, full of humor and despair. "In my case, forever and a day adds up to a little over 4 years. After school lets out in June, I'm going to make a discreet trip to Reno. I'll get a summer job as a waitress or something. The residency requirement is 6 weeks, which means in late July or early August I'll be able to shoot this joke I got myself into, like a horse with a broken leg." "I can wait," I said, but as soon as the words were out of my mouth, I wondered if they were true, because the actors were gathering in the wings, and the show would soon start. By June of '62, Lee Oswald would be back in the USA, living first with Robert and Robert's family, then with his mother. By August, he'd be on Mercedes Street in Fort Worth and working at the nearby Leslie Welding Company, putting together aluminum windows and the kind of storm doors that have initials worked into them. "I'm not sure I can." She spoke in a voice so low I had to strain to hear her. "I was a virgin bride at 23, and now I'm a virgin grass widow at 28. That's a long time for the fruit to hang on the tree, as they say back where I come from, especially when people, your own mother for one, assume you started getting your practical experience and all that birds and bees stuff 4 years ago. I've never told anyone that, and if you repeated it, I think I'd die. It's between us, Sadie, and always will be." "Was he impotent?" "Not exact—" She broke off. There was silence for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was full of horror. "George, is this a party line?" "No. For an extra $350 a month, this baby is all mine." "Thank God. But it's still nothing to be talking about on the phone, and certainly not at Al's Diner over prong burgers. Can you come for supper? We could have a little picnic in my backyard, say around 5. "That would be fine. I'll bring a pound cake or something." "That's not what I want you to bring." "What then?" "I can't say it on the phone, even if it's not a party line. Something you buy in a drugstore, but not the Jody drugstore." "Sadie, don't say anything, please. I'm going to hang up and splash some cold water on my face. It feels like it's on fire." There was a click in my ear. She was gone. I undressed and went to bed, where I lay awake a long time, thinking long thoughts about time and love and death. Chapter 15. At 10 o'clock on that Sunday morning, I jumped into the Sunliner and drove 20 miles to Round Hill. There was a drugstore on the main drag, and it was open, but I saw a "We Roar for the Denholm Lions" sticker on the door and remembered Round Hill was part of Consolidated District 4. I drove on to Killeen. There, an elderly druggist, who bore an eerie but probably coincidental resemblance to Mr. Keene back in Derry, winked at me as he gave me a brown bag and my change. "Don't do anything against the law, son." I returned the wink in the expected fashion and drove back to Jody. I'd had a late night, but when I lay down and tried to nap, I didn't even get in sleep's neighborhood. So I went to the wine gardens and bought a pound cake after all. It looked Sunday stale, but I didn't care and didn't think Sadie would either. Picnic supper or no picnic supper, I was pretty sure food wasn't the number one item on today's agenda. When I knocked on her door, there was a whole cloud of butterflies in my stomach. Sadie's face was free of makeup. She wasn't even wearing lipstick. Her eyes were large, dark, and frightened. For one moment, I was sure she was going to slam the door in my face, and I'd hear her running away just as fast as her long legs would carry her, and that would be that. But she didn't run. "Come on in," she said. "I made chicken salad." Her lips began to tremble. "I hope you like plenty of may—" Her knees started to buckle. I dropped the box with the pound cake inside on the floor and grabbed her. I thought she was going to faint, but she didn't. She put her arms around my neck and held tight like a drowning woman to a floating log. I could feel her body thrumming. I stepped on the goddamn pound cake. Then she did. Squish. "I'm scared," she said. "What if I'm no good at it?" "What if I'm not?" This was not entirely a joke. It had been a long time, at least 4 years. She didn't seem to hear me. "He never wanted me, not the way I expected, and his way is the only way I know. The touching, then the broom." "Calm down, Sadie. Take a breath." "Did you go to the drugstore?" "Yes, in Killeen, but we don't have to." "We do! I do! Before I lose what little courage I have left, come on!" Her bedroom was at the end of the hall. It was Spartan. A bed, a desk, a couple of prints on the walls, chintz curtains dancing in the soft breath of the window air conditioning unit turned down to low. Her knees started to give way again, and I caught her again. It was a weird kind of swing dancing. There were even Arthur Murray footprints on the floor. Pound cake. I kissed her, and her lips fastened on mine, dry and frantic. I pushed her away gently and braced her back against the closet door. She looked at me solemnly, her hair in her eyes. I brushed it away, then very gently began to lick her dry lips with the tip of my tongue. I did it slowly, being sure to get the corners. "Better?" I asked. She answered not with her voice, but with her own tongue. Without pressing my body against hers, I began to very slowly run my hand up and down the long length of her, from where I could feel the rapid beat of her pulse on both sides of her throat, to her chest, her breasts, her stomach, the flat tilted plane of her pubic bone around to one buttock, then down to her thigh. She was wearing jeans. The fabric whispered under my palm. She leaned back and her head bonked on the door. "Ouch," I said. "Are you all right?" She closed her eyes. "I'm fine. Don't stop. Kiss me some more." Then she shook her head. "No, don't kiss me. Do my lips again. Lick me. I like that." I did. She sighed and slipped her fingers under my belt at the small of my back, then around to the front, where the buckle was. I wanted to go fast. Every part of me was yelling for speed, telling me to plunge deep, wanting that perfect gripping sensation that is the essence of the act, but I went slow, at least at first. Then she said, "Don't make me wait. I've had enough of that." And so I kissed the sweaty hollow of her temple and moved my hips forward, as if we were doing a horizontal version of the Madison. She gasped, retreated a little, then raised her own hips to meet me. "Sadie, all right?" "Oh, my God, yes," she said, and I laughed. She opened her eyes and looked up at me with curiosity and hopefulness. "Is it over, or is there more?" "A little more," I said. "I don't know how much. I haven't been with a woman in a long time." It turned out there was quite a bit more. Only a few minutes in real time, but sometimes time is different, as no one knew better than I. At the end, she began to gasp. "Oh, dear! Oh, my dear! Oh, my dear God! Oh, sugar!" It was the sound of greedy discovery and her voice that put me over the edge, so it wasn't quite simultaneous. But a few seconds later, she lifted her head and buried her face in the hollow of my shoulder. A small fisted hand beat on my shoulder blade once, twice, then opened like a flower and lay still. She dropped back onto the pillow. She was staring at me with a stunned, wide-eyed expression that was a little scary. "I came," she said. "I noticed. My mother told me it didn't happen for women, only for men. She said orgasms for women were a myth." She laughed shakily. Oh, my God, what she was missing! She got up on one elbow, then took one of my hands and put it on her breast. Beneath it, her heart was pounding and pounding. "Tell me, Mr. Amberson, how soon before we can do it again?" As the reddening sun sank into the everlasting gas and oil smog to the west, Sadie and I sat in her tiny backyard under a nice old pecan tree, eating chicken salad sandwiches and drinking iced tea. No pound cake, of course. The pound cake was a total loss. "Is it bad for you having to wear those drugstore things?" "It's fine," I said. It really wasn't, and never had been. There would be improvements in a great many American products between 1961 and 2011, but take it from Jake, rubbers stay pretty much the same. They may have fancier names and even a taste component for those with peculiar tastes, but they remain essentially a girdle you snap on over your dick. "I used to have a diaphragm," she said. There was no picnic table, so she'd spread a blanket on the grass. Now she picked up a Tupperware container with the remains of a cucumber and onion salad inside it and began snapping the lid open and closed, a form of fidgeting some people would have considered Freudian, including me. "My mother gave it to me a week before Johnny and I were married. She even told me how to put it in, although she couldn't look me in the eye, and if you'd flicked a drop of water on one of her cheeks, I'm sure it would have sizzled. Don't start a baby for the first 18 months, she said. 2 years if you can make him wait. That way you can live on his salary and save yours." Not the world's worst advice. I was being cautious. We were in a minefield. She knew it as well as I did. "Johnny's a science teacher. He's tall, although not quite as tall as you are. I was tired of going places with men who were shorter than me, and I think that's why I said yes when he first asked me out. Eventually, going out with him got to be a habit. I thought he was nice, and at the end of the night he never seemed to grow an extra pair of hands. At the time, I thought those things were love. I was very naive, wasn't I?" I made a seesaw gesture with my hand. "We met at Georgia Southern and then got jobs at the same high school in Savannah. Co-ed but private. I'm pretty sure his daddy pulled a wire or two to make that happen. The Claytons don't have money, not anymore, although they did once, but they're still high in Savannah society. Poor but genteel, you know." I didn't. Questions of who was in society and who wasn't were never big issues when I was growing up. But I murmured in assent. She had been sitting on top of this for a long time and looked almost hypnotized. "So I had a diaphragm, yes, I did, in its own little plastic lady box with a rose on the cover. Only I never used it, never had to. Finally threw it in the trash after one of those getting it outs. That's what he called it, getting it out. 'I have to get it out,' he used to say. Then the broom, you see." I didn't see at all. Sadie laughed, and I was again reminded of Ivy Templeton. "Wait 2 years," she said. "We could have waited 20 and no diaphragm required." "What happened?" I gripped her upper arms lightly. "Did he beat you?" "Beat you with a broom handle?" There was another way a broom handle could be used. I'd read Last Exit to Brooklyn, but apparently he hadn't done that. She'd been a virgin, all right. The proof was on the sheets. "No, the broom wasn't for beating. George, I don't think I can talk about this anymore. Not now. I feel, I don't know, like a bottle of soda that's been shaken up. Do you know what I want?" I thought so, but did the polite thing and asked, "I want you to take me inside and then take the cap off." She raised her hands over her head and stretched. She hadn't bothered putting her bra back on, and I could see her breasts lift under her blouse. Her nipples made tiny shadows like punctuation marks against the cloth in the late night. She said, "I don't want to relive the past today. Today I only want a fizz." An hour later I saw she was drowsing. I kissed her first on the forehead and then on the nose to wake her up. "I have to go, if only to get my car out of your driveway before your neighbors start to call their friends." "I suppose so. It's the Sanfords next door, and Lila Sanford is this month's student librarian." And I was pretty sure that Lila's father was on the school board, but I didn't say so. Sadie was glowing, and there was no need to spoil that. For all the Sanfords knew, we were sitting on the couch with our knees together, waiting for Dennis the Menace to finish and Ed Sullivan's Really Big Shoe to come on. If my car was still in Sadie's driveway at 11, their perceptions might change. She watched me dress. "What happens now, George? With us?" "I want to be with you, if you want to be with me. Is that what you want?" She sat up, the sheet puddled around her waist, and reached for her cigarettes. "Very much. But I'm married, and that won't change until next summer in Reno. If I tried for an annulment, Johnny would fight me. Hell, his parents would fight me. If we're discreet, everything will be fine. But we have to be discreet. You know that, right?" She laughed and lit up. "Oh, yes, I know that. Sadie, have you had discipline problems in the library?" "Huh? Some, sure. The usual." She shrugged. Her breasts bobbed. I wished I hadn't dressed quite so fast. On the other hand, who was I kidding? James Bond might have been up for a third go-round, but Jake/George was tapped out. "I'm the new girl in school. They're testing me. It's a pain in the keister, but nothing I didn't expect. Why?" "I think your problems are about to vanish. Students love it when teachers fall in love. Even the boys. It's like a TV show to them." "Will they know that we've—" I thought about it. "Some of the girls will. The ones with experience." She huffed out smoke. "Great." But she didn't look entirely displeased. "How about dinner out at the Saddle in Round Hill? Get people used to seeing us as a couple." "All right, tomorrow?" "No, I have something to do in Dallas tomorrow." "Research for your book?" "Mm-hmm." Here we were, brand new, and I was lying already. I didn't like it, but saw no way around it. As for the future, I refused to think about that now. I had my own glow to protect. "Tuesday?" "Yes. And George." "What?" "We have to find a way to keep doing this." I smiled. "Love will find a way." "I think this part is more lust." "It's both, maybe." "You're a sweet man, George Amberson." Christ, even the name was a lie. "I'll tell you about Johnny and me when I can. And if you want to hear—" "I want to." I thought I had to. If this was going to work, I had to understand. About her, about him. About the broom. When you're ready. As our esteemed principal likes to say, students, this will be challenging, but worthwhile. I laughed. She butted out her cigarette. One thing I wonder about, would Miss Mimi approve of us? I'm pretty sure she would. I think so, too. Drive home safe, my dear, and you better take those. She was pointing at the paper bag from the Killeen pharmacy. It was sitting on top of her dresser. If I had the kind of nosy company who checks the medicine cabinet after they TT, I'd have some explaining to do. Good idea. But keep them handy, honey. And she winked. On the way home, I found myself thinking about those rubbers. Trojan brand, and ribbed for her pleasure, according to the box. The lady didn't have a diaphragm any longer, although I guessed she might arrange for one on her next trip to Dallas, and birth control pills wouldn't be widely available for another year or two. Even then, doctors would be wary about prescribing them if I remembered my modern sociology course correctly. So, for now, it was Trojans. I wore them not for her pleasure, but so she wouldn't have a baby, which was amusing when you considered that I wouldn't be a baby myself for another 15 years. Thinking about the future is confusing in all sorts of ways. The following evening, I revisited Silent Mike's establishment. The sign in the door was turned to closed, and the place looked empty, but when I knocked, my electronics buddy let me in. "Right on time, Mr. Doe. Right on time," he said. "Let's see what you think." "Me? I think I outdid myself." I stood by the glass case filled with transistor radios and waited while he disappeared into the back room. He returned holding a lamp in each hand. The shades were grimy as if they'd been adjusted by a great many dirty fingers. The base of one was chipped, so it stood crooked on the counter, the leaning lamp of Pisa. They were perfect, and I told him so. He grinned and put 2 of the boxed tape recorders next to the lamps, also a drawstring bag containing several lengths of wire, so thin it was almost invisible. "Want a little tutorial?" "I think I've got it," I said, and put 520s down on the counter. I was a little touched when he tried to push one back. "180 was the price we agreed on. The other 20 is for you to forget I was ever here." He considered this for a moment, then put a thumb on the stray 20 and pulled it into the group with its little green friends. "I already did that. Why don't I consider this a tip?" As he put the stuff into a brown paper bag, I was struck by simple curiosity and asked him a question. "Kennedy? I didn't vote for him, but as long as he doesn't go taking his orders from the Pope, I think he'll be okay. The country needs somebody younger. It's a due age, you know." "If he were to come to Dallas, do you think he'd be all right?" "Probably. Can't say for sure, though. On the whole, if I were him, I'd stay north of the Mason-Dixon line." I grinned. "Where all is calm, all is bright?" Silent Mike, Holy Mike said, "Don't start." There was a rack of pigeonholes for mail and school announcements in the first-floor teacher's room. On Tuesday morning, during my free period, I found a small sealed envelope in mine. "Dear George, if you still want to take me to dinner tonight, it'll have to be 5-ish, because I'll have early mornings all this week and next, getting ready for the fall book sale. Perhaps we could come back to my place for dessert. I have pound cake, if you'd like a slice. Sadie." "What are you laughing about, Amberson?" Danny Laverty asked. He was correcting themes with a hollow-eyed intensity that suggested hangover. "Tell me, I could use a giggle." "No," I said. "Private joke. You wouldn't get it." But we got it. Pound cake became our name for it, and we ate plenty that fall. We were discreet, but of course there were people who knew what was going on. There was probably some gossip, but no scandal. Small-town folks are rarely mean folks. They knew Sadie's situation, at least in a general way, and understood we could make no public commitment, at least for a while. She didn't come to my house. That would have caused the wrong kind of talk. I never stayed beyond 10 o'clock at hers. That also would have caused the wrong kind of talk. There was no way I could have put my Sunliner in her garage and stayed the night because her Volkswagen Beetle, small as it was, filled it almost wall to wall. I wouldn't have done so in any case because someone would have known. In small towns, they always do. I visited her after school. I dropped by for the meal she called supper. Sometimes we went to Al's Diner and ate prong burgers or catfish fillets. Sometimes we went to the Saddle. Twice I took her to the Saturday night dances at the local Grange. We saw movies at the Gem in town, or at the Mesa in Round Hill, or at the Starlight Drive-In in Killeen, which the kids called the submarine races. At a nice restaurant like the Saddle, she might have a glass of wine before dinner and I might have a beer with, but we were careful not to be seen at any of the local taverns. Certainly not at the Red Rooster, Jody's one and only juke joint, a place our students talked about with longing and awe. It was 1961, and segregation might finally be softening in the middle. Negroes had won the right to sit at the Woolworth's lunch counters in Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston, but school teachers didn't drink in the Red Rooster. Not if they wanted to keep their jobs. Never, never, never. When we made love in Sadie's bedroom, she always kept a pair of slacks, a sweater, and a pair of moccasins on her side of the bed. She called it her emergency outfit. The one time the doorbell bonged while we were naked, a state that she had taken to calling in flagrante delicious, she got into those threads in 10 seconds flat. She came back, giggling and waving a copy of The Watchtower. Jehovah's Witnesses, I told them I was saved, and they went away. Once, as we ate ham steaks and okra in her kitchen afterward, she said our courtship reminded her of that movie with Audrey Hepburn and Gary Cooper, Love in the Afternoon. Sometimes I wonder if it would be better at night, she said this a little wistfully, when regular people do it. You'll get a chance to find out, I said. Hang in there, baby. She smiled and kissed the corner of my mouth. You turn some cool phrases, George. Oh, yes, I said. I'm very original. She pushed her plate aside. I'm ready for dessert. How about you? Not long after the Jehovah's Witnesses came calling at Sadie's place. This must have been early November because I'd finished casting my version of 12 Angry Men. I was out raking my lawn when someone said, Hello, George, how's it going? I turned around and saw Deke Simmons, now a widower for the second time. He had stayed in Mexico longer than anyone had thought he would, and just when folks began to believe he was going to remain there, he had come back. This was the first time I'd seen him. He was very brown, but far too thin. His clothes bagged on him, and his hair, iron gray on the day of the wedding reception, was now almost all white and thinning on top. I dropped my rake and hurried over to him. I meant to shake his hand, but hugged him instead. It startled him. In 1961, real men don't hug. But then he laughed. I held him at arm's length. You look great. Nice try, George, but I feel better than I did. Meme's dying. I knew it was going to happen, but it still knocked me for a loop. Head could never get through to heart on that one, I reckon. Come on in and have a cup of coffee. I'd like that. We talked about his time in Mexico. We talked about school. We talked about the undefeated football team and the upcoming fall play. Then he put down his cup and said, Ellen Doherty asked me to pass on a word or two about you and Sadie Clayton. Uh-oh. And I'd thought we were doing so well. She goes by Dunhill now. It's her maiden name. I know all about her situation. Knew when we hired her. She's a fine girl, and you're a fine man, George. Based on what Ellie tells me, the two of you are handling a difficult situation with a fair amount of grace." I relaxed a little. Ellie said she was pretty sure neither of you knew about Candlewood Bungalows, just outside of Killeen. She didn't feel right about telling you, so she asked if I would. Candlewood Bungalows? I used to take memes there on a lot of Saturday nights. He was fiddling at his coffee cup with hands that now looked too big for his body. It's run by a couple of retired school teachers from Arkansas, or Alabama. One of those A states, anyway. Retired men, school teachers, if you know what I mean. I think I'm following you, yes. They're nice fellows, very quiet about their own relationship and about the relationships of some of their guests. He looked up from his coffee cup. He was blushing a little, but also smiling. This isn't a hot sheet joint, if that's what you're thinking. Farthest thing from it. The rooms are nice, the prices are reasonable, and the little restaurant down the road is country fare. Sometimes a gal needs a place like that, and maybe a man does too. So they don't have to be in such a hurry, and so they won't feel cheap. "Thank you," I said. "Very welcome. Mimi and I had many pleasant evenings at the Candlewood. Sometimes we only watched the TV in our pajamas and then went to bed, but that can be as good as anything else when you get to a certain age." He smiled ruefully, or almost. We'd go to sleep listening to the crickets, or sometimes a coyote would howl very far away out in the sage. At the moon, you know. They really do that. They howl at the moon. He took a handkerchief from his back pocket with an old man's slowness and mopped his cheeks with it. I offered my hand, and Deke took hold. "She liked you, although she never could figure out what to make of you. She said you reminded her of the way they used to show ghosts in those old movies from the 30s. He's bright and shiny, but not all here," she said. "I'm no ghost," I said, "I promise you." He smiled. "No. I finally got around to checking your references. This was after you'd been subbing for us a while and did such a bang-up job with the play. The ones from the Sarasota School District are fine, but beyond there—" He shook his head, still smiling. "And your degree is from a mill in Oklahoma." Clearing my throat did no good. I couldn't speak at all. "And what's that to me, you ask? Not much. There was a time in this part of the world when if a man rode into town with a few books in his saddlebag, spectacles on his nose, and a tie around his neck, he could get hired on as a schoolmaster and stay for 20 years. Wasn't that long ago, either. You're a damn fine teacher. The kids know it, I know it, and Memes knew it too. And that's a lot to me. Does Ellen know I faked my other references? Because Ellen Dougherty was acting principal, and once the school board met in January, the job would be hers permanently. There were no other candidates. "Nope, but she's not going to. Not for me, at least. I feel like she doesn't need to." He stood up. "But there's one person who does need to know the truth about where you've been and what you've done, and that's a certain lady librarian. If you're serious about her, that is." "Are you?" "Yes," I said, and Deke nodded as if that took care of everything. I only wished it did. Thanks to Deke Simmons, Sadie finally got to find out what it was like to make love after sundown. When I asked her how it was, she told me it had been wonderful. "But I'm looking forward to waking up next to you in the morning even more. Do you hear the wind?" I did. It hooted around the eaves. "Doesn't that sound make you feel cozy?" "Yes." "I'm going to say something now. I hope it doesn't make you uncomfortable." "Tell me." "I guess I've fallen in love with you. Maybe it's just the sex. I've heard that's a mistake people make, but I don't think so." "Sadie?" "Yes?" She was trying to smile, but she looked frightened. "I love you, too. No maybe or mistake about it." "Oh, thank God," she said, and snuggled close. On our second visit to the Candlewood bungalows, she was ready to talk about Johnny Clayton. "But turn out the light, would you?" I did as she asked. She smoked 3 cigarettes during the telling. Toward the end, she cried hard, probably not from remembered pain so much as simple embarrassment. For most of us, I think it's easier to admit doing wrong than being stupid. Not that she had been. There's a world of difference between stupidity and naivete. And like most good middle-class girls who came to maturity in the 1940s and 50s, Sadie knew almost nothing about sex. She said she'd never actually looked at a penis until she'd looked at mine. She'd had glimpses of Johnny's, but she said if he caught her looking, he would take hold of her face and turn it away with a grip that stopped just short of painful. But it always did hurt, she said. You know, John Clayton came from a conventionally religious family. Nothing nutty about them. He was pleasant, attentive, reasonably attractive. He didn't have the world's greatest sense of humor. Almost none might have been closer to the mark. But he seemed to adore her. Her parents adored him. Claire Dunhill was especially crazy about Johnny Clayton. And, of course, he was taller than Sadie, even when she was in heels. After years of beanpole jokes, that was important. The only troubling thing about the marriage was his compulsive neatness, Sadie said. He had all his books alphabetized, and he got very upset if you moved them around. He was nervous if you took even one off the shelf. You could feel it, a kind of tensing. He shaved 3 times a day and washed his hands all the time. If someone shook with him, he'd make an excuse to rush off to the lab and wash just as soon as he could. Also color-coordinated clothes, I said, on his body and in the closet, and woe to the person who moved them around. Did he alphabetize the stuff in the pantry, or get up sometimes in the night to check that the stove burners were off and the doors were locked? She turned to me, her eyes wide and wondering in the dark. The bed squeaked companionably. The wind gusted. A loose window pane rattled. "How do you know that?" "It's a syndrome, obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD for short. I stopped. Howard Hughes has a bad case of it, I'd started to say. But maybe that wasn't true yet. Even if it was, people probably didn't know. An old friend of mine had it, Howard Temple. Never mind. Did he hurt you, Sadie?" "Not really, no beating or punching. He slapped me once, that's all. But people hurt people in other ways, don't they?" "Yes." "I couldn't talk to anyone about it, certainly not my mother. Do you know what she told me on my wedding day? That if I said half a prayer before and half a prayer during, everything would be fine. During was as close as she could come to the word intercourse. I tried to talk to my friend Ruthie about it, but only once. This was after school, and she was helping me pick up the library. What goes on behind the bedroom door is none of my business, she said. I stopped, because I didn't really want to talk about it. I was so ashamed. Then it came in a rush. Some of what she said was blurred by tears, but I got the gist. On certain nights, maybe once a week, maybe twice, he would tell her he needed to get it out. They would be lying side by side in bed, she in her nightgown. He insisted she wear ones that were opaque. He in a pair of boxer shorts. Boxers were the closest she ever came to seeing him naked. He would push the sheet down to his waist, and she would see his erection tenting them. Once he looked at that little tent himself, only once that I remember. And you know what he said? No. How disgusting we are. Then he said, get it over with so I can get some sleep. She would reach beneath the sheet and masturbate him. It never took long, sometimes only seconds. On a few occasions he touched her breasts as she performed this function, but mostly his hands remained knotted high on his chest. When it was over, he would go into the bathroom, wash himself off, and come back in wearing his pajamas. He had 7 pairs, all blue. Then it was her turn to go into the bathroom and wash her hands. He insisted that she do this for at least 3 minutes and under water hot enough to turn her skin red. When she came back to bed, she held her palms out to his face. If the smell of Lifebuoy wasn't strong enough to satisfy him, she would have to do it again. And when I came back, the broom would be there. He would put it on top of the sheet if it was summer, on the blankets if it was winter, running straight down the middle of the bed, his side and her side. If I was restless and happened to move it, he'd wake up. No matter how fast asleep he was, he'd push me back to my side, hard. He called it transgressing the broom. The time he slapped her was when she asked how they would ever have children if he never put it in her. He was furious. That's why he slapped me. He apologized later, but what he said right then was, "Do you think I'd put myself in your germy woman hole and bring children into this filthy world? It's all going to blow up anyway. Anyone who reads the paper can see that coming. And the radiation will kill us. We'll die with sores all over our bodies and coughing up our lungs. It could happen any day." Jesus, no wonder you left him, Sadie. Only after 4 wasted years, it took me that long to convince myself that I deserved more from life than color coordinating my husband's sock drawer, giving him hand jobs twice a week, and sleeping with a goddamn broom. That was the most humiliating part, the part I was sure I could never talk about to anyone, because it was funny. I didn't think it was funny. I thought it was somewhere in the twilight zone between neurosis and outright psychosis. I also thought I was listening to the perfect 50s fable. It was easy to imagine Rock Hudson and Doris Day sleeping with a broom between them. If Rock hadn't been gay, that was. And he hasn't come looking for you. No, I applied to a dozen different schools and had the answers sent to a post office box. I felt like a woman having an affair, sneaking around, and that's how my mother and father treated me when they found out. My dad has come around a little. I think he suspects how bad it was, although, of course, he doesn't want to know any of the details. But my mother, not her. She's furious with me. She had to change churches and quit the sewing bee because she couldn't hold her head up, she says. In a way, this seemed as cruel and crazy as the broom, but I didn't say so. A different aspect of the matter interested me more than Sadie's conventional Southern parents. Clayton didn't tell them you were gone? Have I got that right? Never came to see them? No. My mother understood, of course. Sadie's ordinarily faint Southern accent deepened. I just shamed that poor boy so bad that he didn't want to tell anyone. She dropped the drawl. I'm not being sarcastic either. She understands shame, and she understands covering up. On those two things, Johnny and my mama are in perfect harmony. She's the one he should have married. She laughed a little hysterically. Mama probably would have loved that old broom. Never a word from him? Not even a postcard saying, "Hey, Sadie, let's tie up the loose ends so we can get on with our lives." How could there be? He doesn't know where I am, and I'm sure he doesn't care. Is there anything you want from him? Because I'm sure a lawyer— She kissed me. The only thing I want is here, in bed, with me. I kicked the sheets down to her ankles. Look at me, Sadie. No charge. She looked, and then she touched. I drowsed afterward, not deep. I could still hear the wind and that one rattling window pane, but I got far enough down to dream. Sadie and I were in an empty house. We were naked. Something was moving around upstairs. It made thudding, unpleasant noises. It might have been pacing, but it seemed as if there were too many feet. I didn't feel guilty that we were going to be discovered with our clothes off. I felt scared. Written in charcoal on the peeling plaster of one wall were the words, "I will kill the president soon." Below it, someone had added, "Not soon enough, he's full of disease." This had been printed in dark lipstick, or maybe it was blood. Thud, clump, thud, from overhead. "I think it's Frank Dunning," I whispered to Sadie. I gripped her arm. It was very cold. It was like gripping the arm of a dead person, a woman who'd been beaten to death with a sledgehammer, perhaps. Sadie shook her head. She was looking up at the ceiling, her mouth trembling. Clud, thump, clud, plaster dust sifting down. Then, "It's John Clayton," I whispered. "No," she said, "I think it's the yellow card man. He brought the Jimla." Above us, the thudding stopped abruptly. She took hold of my arm and began to shake it. Her eyes were eating up her face. It's the Jimla, and it hurt us. The Jimla knows we're here." "Wake up, George, wake up!" I opened my eyes. She was propped on one elbow beside me, her face a pale blur. What time is it? Do we have to go?" But it was still dark, and the wind was still high. "No, it isn't even midnight. You were having a bad dream." She laughed a little nervously. "Maybe about football? Because you were saying Jimla. Was I?" I sat up. There was the scrape of a match, and her face was momentarily illuminated as she lit a cigarette. "Yes, you said all kinds of stuff." That was not good. "Like what?" "Most of it I couldn't make out, but one thing was pretty clear. Derry is Dallas, you said. Then you said it backwards. Dallas is Derry. What was that about? Do you remember?" "No." But it's hard to lie convincingly when you're fresh out of sleep, even a shallow doze, and I saw skepticism on her face. Before it could deepen into disbelief, there was a knock at the door. 1:45, a knock? We stared at each other. The knock came again. "It's the Jimla." This thought was very clear, very certain. Sadie put her cigarette in the ashtray, gathered the sheet around her, and ran to the bathroom without a word. The door shut behind her. "Who is it?" I asked. "It's Mr. Yority, sir, Bud Yority," one of the gay retired teachers who ran the place. I got out of bed and pulled on my pants. "What is it, Mr. Yority?" "I have a message for you, sir. Lady said it was urgent." I opened the door. He was a small man in a threadbare bathrobe. His hair was a sleep-frizzed cloud around his head. In one hand he held a piece of paper. "What lady?" "Ellen Docherty?" I thanked him for his trouble and closed the door. I unfolded the paper and read the message. Sadie came out of the bathroom still clutching the sheet. Her eyes were wide and frightened. "What is it?" "There's been an accident," I said. Vince Knowles rolled his pickup truck outside of town. Mike Coslaw and Bobby Jill were with him. Mike was thrown clear. He has a broken arm. Bobby Jill has a nasty cut on her face, but Ellie says she's okay otherwise. "Vince?" I thought of the way everyone said Vince drove, as if there were no tomorrow. Now there wasn't, not for him. "He's dead, Sadie." Her mouth dropped open. "He can't be. He's only 18 years old." "I know." The sheet fell free of her relaxing arms and puddled around her feet. She put her hands over her face. My revised version of 12 Angry Men was canceled. What took its place was Death of a Student, a play in 3 acts: the viewing at the funeral parlor, the service at Grace Methodist Church, the graveside service at West Hill Cemetery. This mournful show was attended by the whole town, or near enough to make no difference. The parents and Vince's stunned kid sister starred at the viewing, sitting in folding chairs beside the coffin. When I approached them with Sadie at my side, Mrs. Knowles rose and put her arms around me. I was almost overwhelmed by the odors of White Shoulders perfume and Eudora antiperspirant. "You changed his life," she whispered in my ear. "He told me so. For the first time he made his grades because he wanted to act." "Mrs. Knowles, I'm so sorry," I said. Then a terrible thought crossed my mind, and I hugged her tighter as if hugging could make it go away. Maybe it's the butterfly effect. Maybe Vince is dead because I came to Jody. The coffin was flanked by photomontages of Vince's too brief life. On an easel in front of it, all by itself, was a picture of him in his Of Mice and Men costume and that battered old felt hat from Props. His ratty, intelligent face peered out from beneath. Vince really hadn't been much of an actor, but that photo caught him wearing an absolute, perfect, wise-ass smile. Sadie began to sob, and I knew why. Life turns on a dime. Sometimes toward us, but more often it spins away, flirting and flashing as it goes. So long, honey. It was good while it lasted, wasn't it? And Jody was good. Good for me. In Derry, I was an outsider, but Jody was home. Here's home. The smell of the sage, and the way the hills flush orange with Indian blanket in the summer, the faint taste of tobacco on Sadie's tongue, and the squeak of the oiled wood floorboards in my homeroom. Ellie Doherty carrying enough to send us a message in the middle of the night, perhaps so we could get back to town undiscovered, but probably just so we'd know. The nearly suffocating mixture of perfume and deodorant as Mrs. Knowles hugged me. Mike putting his arm, the one not buried in a cast, around me at the cemetery, then pressing his face against my shoulder until he could get himself under control again. The ugly red slash on Bobby Jill's face is home, too. And thinking that unless she had plastic surgery, which her family could not afford, it would leave a scar that would remind her for the rest of her life of how she'd seen a boy from just down the road dead at the side of the road, his head mostly torn off his shoulders. Home is the black armband that Sadie wore, that I wore, that the whole faculty wore for a week after, and Al Stevens posting Vince's photo in the window of his diner, and Jimmy Ledoux's tears as he stood up in front of the whole school and dedicated the undefeated season to Vince Knowles. Other things, too. People saying howdy on the street, people giving me a wave from their cars. Al Stevens taking Sadie and me to the table at the back that he had started calling our table, playing cribbage on Friday afternoons in the teacher's room with Danny Laverty for a penny a point, arguing with elderly Miss Mayer about who gave the better newscast, Chet Huntley and David Brinkley, or Walter Cronkite. My street, my shotgun house, getting used to using a typewriter again, having a best girl, and getting S&H green stamps with my groceries, and real butter on my movie popcorn. Home is watching the moon rise over the open, sleeping land and having someone you can call to the window so you can look together. Home is where you dance with others, and dancing is life. The year of our Lord 1961 was winding down. On a drizzly day about 2 weeks before Christmas, I came into my house after school, once more bundled into my rawhide ranch coat, and heard the phone ringing. "This is Ivy Templeton," a woman said. "You probably don't even remember me, do you?" "I remember you very well, Miss Templeton." "I don't know why I even bothered to call. That goddamn $10 is long since spent. Just something about you stuck in my head. Rosette, too. She calls you the man who cotched my ball." "You're moving out, Miss Templeton?" "That's 100% goddamn right. My mama's coming up from Moselle tomorrow in the truck." "Don't you have a car, or did it break down?" "Car's running okay for a junker, but Harry ain't gonna be riding in it, or driving it ever again. He was working one of those goddamn manpower jobs last month. Fell in a ditch, and a gravel truck run over him while it was backing up, broke his spine." Closed my eyes and saw the smashed remains of Vince's truck being hauled down Main Street behind the wrecker from Goji's Sunoco, blood all over the inside of the cracked windshield. I'm sorry to hear that, Miss Templeton. He gonna live, but he ain't never gonna walk again. He gonna sit in a wheelchair and pee in a bag. That's what he gonna do. But first, he's gonna ride down Moselle in the back of my mama's truck. We'll steal the mattress out in the bedroom for him to lay on. Be like taking your dog on vacation, won't it? She started to cry. I'm running out on 2 months' back rent, but that don't confront me none. You know what does confront me, Mr. Puddin'-Tane? Ask me again, and I'll tell you the same. I got 35 goddamn dollars, and that's the end of it. Goddamn asshole Harry, if he could have kept his feet, I wouldn't be in this fix. I thought I was in one before, but now look at this. There was a long, watery snork in my ear. Know what? The mailman been giving me the glad eye, and I think for $20 I'd roll him a fuck on the goddamn living room floor. If the goddamn neighbors across the street couldn't watch us while we was going at it. Can't very well take him in the bedroom, can I? That's where my broke-back husband is. She rasped out a laugh. Tell you what, why don't you come on over in your fancy convertible? Take me to a motel somewhere, spend a little extra, get one with a setting room. Rosette can watch TV and I'll roll you a fuck. You look like you's doing okay. I said nothing. I just had an idea that was as bright as a flashbulb. If the goddamn neighbors across the street couldn't watch us going at it. There was a man I was supposed to be watching for. Besides Oswald himself, that was. A man whose name also happened to be George, and who was going to become Oswald's only friend. Don't trust him, Al had written in his notes. You there, Mr. Puddin'-Tane? No? If not, fuck you and goodbye. Don't hang up, Miss Templeton. Suppose I were to pay your back rent and throw in $100 on top of that. It was far more than I needed to pay for what I wanted, but I had it and she needed it. Right now, I'd do you with my father watching for $200. You don't have to do me at all, Miss Templeton. All you have to do is meet me in that parking lot at the end of the street and bring me something. It was dark by the time I got to the parking lot of the Montgomery Ward warehouse, and the rain had started to thicken a little, the way it does when it's trying to be sleet. That doesn't happen often in the hill country south of Dallas, but sometimes isn't never. I hoped I could make it back to Jody without sliding off the road. Ivy was sitting behind the wheel of a sad old sedan with rusty rocker panels and a cracked rear window. She got into my Ford and immediately leaned toward the heater vent, which was going full blast. She was wearing 2 flannel shirts instead of a coat and shivering. Feels good. That Chev's colder'n a witch's tit. Heater's bust. You bring the money, Mr. Puddin'-Tane? I gave her an envelope. She opened it and riffled through some of the 20s that had been sitting on the top shelf of my closet ever since I'd collected on my World Series bet at Faith Financial over a year before. She lifted her substantial bottom off the seat, shoved the envelope into the back pocket of her jeans, then fumbled in the breast pocket of the shirt closer to her body. She brought out a key and slapped it into my hand. That do you? It did me very well. It's a dupe, right? Just like you told me. I had it made at the hardware store on McLaren Street. Why you want a key to that glorified shithouse? For $200 you could rent it for 4 months. I've got my reasons. Tell me about the neighbors across the street, the ones that could watch you and the mailman doing it on the living room floor. She shifted uneasily and pulled her shirts a little closer across her equally substantial bosom. I was just joking about that. I know. I didn't, and I didn't care. I just want to know if the neighbors can really see into your living room. Course they can, and I could see into theirs if they didn't have curtains, which I would have bought for our place could I afford 'em. When it comes to privacy, we all might as well be living outside. I suppose I could have put up burlap, Scavenged it from right over there." She pointed to the trash bins lined up against the east side of the warehouse. "But it looks so slutty." "The neighbors with the view live at what, 2704? 2706. It used to be Slider Burnett and his family, but they moved out just after Halloween. He was a substitute rodeo clown. Do you believe it? Who knew there was such a job? Now it's some fellow named Hazard and his 2 kids, and I think his mother. Rosette won't play with the kids, says they're dirty, which is a newsflash coming from that little pig pan. Old Grammy tries to talk, and it comes out all mush. Side of her face won't move. Don't know what help she can be to him, dragging around like she does. If I get like that, just shoot me. Doggies." She shook her head. "Tell you one thing. They won't be there long. No one stays on Sadie Street." "Got a cigarette?" I had to give him up. When you can't afford a quarter for fags, that's when you know for sure you're on your goddamn uppers. "I don't smoke." She shrugged. "What the hell? I can afford my own now, can't I? I'm goddamn rich." "You ain't married, are you?" "No." "Got a girlfriend, though. I can smell perfume on this side of the car, the nice stuff." That made me smile. "Yes, I've got a girlfriend." "Good for you. Does she know you're sneaking around the south side of Fort Worth after dark doing funny business?" I said nothing, but sometimes that's answer enough. "Never mind. That's between you and her. I'm warm now, so I'll go on back. If it's still rainy and cold like this tomorrow, I don't know what we're going to do about Harry in the back of my ma's truck." She looked at me smiling. "When I was a kid, I used to think I was going to grow up to be Kim Novak. Now, Rosette, she thinks she's going to replace Darlene on the Musketeers. Howdy fucking ho." She started to open the door, and I said, "Wait." I raked the crap out of my pockets, lifesavers, Kleenex, book of matches Sadie had tucked in there, notes for a freshman English test I meant to give before the Christmas break, and then gave her the ranch coat. "Take this." "I ain't taking your goddamn coat." She looked shocked. "I've got another one at home." I didn't, but I could buy one, and that was more than she could do. "What am I going to tell Harry? That I found it under a goddamn cabbage leaf?" I grinned. "Tell him you rolled the mailman a fuck and bought it with the proceeds. What's he going to do, chase you down the driveway and beat you up?" She laughed, a harsh rainbird caw that was strangely charming, and took the coat. "Regards to Rosette," I said. "Tell her I'll see her in her dreams." She stopped smiling. "I hope not, mister. That one she had about you was a nightmare. About screamed the house down, she did. Woke me out of a dead sleep at 2 a.m. She said the man who cotched her ball had a monster in the back seat of his car, and she was afraid it would eat her up. Scared the life out of me, she did, screaming like that." "Did the monster have a name?" "Of course it did. She said it was a Jimlaw? Probably meant a genie, like in those stories about Aladdin and the 7 Veils. Anyway, I gotta go. You take care of yourself." "You too, Ivy. Merry Christmas." She cawed her rainbird laugh again. "Almost forgot about that. You have one, too. Don't forget to give your girl a present." She trotted to her old car with my coat, her coat now, thrown over her shoulders. I never saw her again. The rain only froze on the bridges, and I knew from my other life, the one in New England, to be careful on those. But it was still a long drive back to Jody. I had no more than put the water on for a cup of tea when the phone rang. This time it was Sadie. "I've been trying to get you since supper time to ask you about Coach Bowman's Christmas Eve bash. It starts at 3. I'll go if you want to take me, because then we can get away early. Say we've got dinner reservations at the Saddle or something. I need to RSVP, though." I saw my own invitation lying next to my typewriter and felt a little twinge of guilt. It had been there for 3 days, and I hadn't even opened it. "Do you want to go?" I asked. "I wouldn't mind making an appearance." There was a pause. "Where have you been all this time?" "Fort Worth." I almost added Christmas shopping, but I didn't. The only thing I'd bought in Fort Worth was some information and a house key. "Were you shopping?" Again, I had to fight not to lie. Sadie, I really can't say." There was a long, long pause. I found myself wishing I smoked. Probably I'd developed a contact addiction. God knew I was smoking by proxy all day, every day. The teacher's room was a constant blue haze. "Is it a woman, George? Another woman, or am I being nosy?" Well, there was Ivy, but that wasn't the kind of woman she was talking about. "In the woman department, there's only you." Another of those long, long pauses. In the world, Sadie could move carelessly. In her head, she never did. At last she said, "You know a lot about me, things I never thought I could tell anyone, but I know almost nothing about you." I guess I just realized that. Sadie can be stupid, George, can't she? You're not stupid, and one thing you do know is that I love you. Yes. She sounded doubtful. I remembered the bad dream I'd had that night at the Candlewood Bungalows and the caution I'd seen in her face when I told her I didn't remember it. Was that the same look on her face now? Or perhaps an expression a little deeper than mere caution? "Sadie, are we all right?" "Yes," sounding a little more sure now. "Sure we are. Except for Coach's party, what do you want to do about it? Remember that the whole darn school department will be there, and most of them will be drunk on their fannies by the time Mrs. Coach puts on the buffet." "Let's go," I said, too heartily. "Party down and kick out the jams." "Kick out the what?" "Have some fun. That's all I meant. We'll pop in for an hour, maybe an hour and a half, then pop back out. Dinner at the Saddle. That work for you?" "Fine." We were like a couple negotiating for a second date after the first one had been inconclusive. "We'll enjoy ourselves." I thought about Ivy Templeton smelling the ghost of Sadie's perfume and asking if my girl knew I was sneaking around South Fort Worth after dark doing funny business. I thought about Deke Simmons saying there was one person who deserved to know the truth about where I'd been and what I'd done. But was I going to tell Sadie I'd killed Frank Dunning in cold blood so he wouldn't murder his wife and 3 of his 4 children? That I'd come to Texas to prevent an assassination and change the course of history? That I knew I could do that because I came from a future where we could have been I-emming this conversation via computer? "Sadie, this is going to work out, I promise you that." Again she said, "Fine." Then she said, "I'll see you tomorrow, George, in school," and hung up very gently and politely. I held the telephone in my hand for several seconds, staring straight ahead at nothing. A rattling began on the windows facing my backyard. The rain had turned to sleet, after all. Chapter 16. Coach Borman's Christmas Eve bash was a bust, and the ghost of Vince Knowles wasn't the only reason. On the 21st, Bobby Jill Allnut got tired of looking at that red slash running all the way down the left side of her face to the jawline and took a bunch of her mother's sleeping pills. She didn't die, but she spent 2 nights in Parkland Memorial, the hospital where both the president and the president's assassin would expire, unless I changed things. There are probably closer hospitals in 2011, almost certainly in Killeen, maybe even in Round Hill, but not during my 1 year of full-time teaching at DCHS. Dinner at the Saddle wasn't so hot either. The place was packed and convivial with pre-Christmas cheer, but Sadie refused dessert and asked to go home early. She said she had a headache. I didn't believe her. The New Year's Eve dance at Bountiful Grange No. 7 was a little better. There was a band from Austin called the Jokers, and they were really laying it down. Sadie and I danced beneath sagging nets filled with balloons until our feet were sore. At midnight, the Jokers swung into a venture-style version of Auld Lang Syne, and the band's lead band shouted, "May all your dreams come true in 1962. The balloons drifted down around us. I kissed Sadie and wished her a Happy New Year as we waltzed, but although she had been gay and laughing all evening, I felt no smile on her lips. And a Happy New Year to you, George. Could I have a glass of punch? I'm very thirsty." There was a long line at the spiked punch bowl, a shorter one at the unspiked version. I ladled the mixture of pink lemonade and ginger ale into a Dixie cup, but when I brought it back to where she had been standing, Sadie was gone. "Think she went out for some air, champ," Carl Jacoby said. He was one of the high school's 4 shop teachers, and probably the best, but I wouldn't have let him within 200 yards of a power tool that night. I checked the smokers clustered under the fire escape. Sadie wasn't among them. I walked to the Sunliner. She was sitting in the passenger seat, with her voluminous skirts billowing all the way up to the dashboard. God knows how many petticoats she was wearing. She was smoking and crying. I got in and tried to take her in my arms. "Sadie, what is it? What is it, hon?" As if I didn't know. As if I hadn't known for some time. "Nothing," crying harder. "I've got my period, that's all. Take me home." It was only 3 miles, but that seemed like a very long drive. We didn't talk. I turned into her driveway and cut the motor. She'd stopped crying, but she still didn't say anything. Neither did I. Some silences can be comfortable. This one felt deadly. She took her Winstons out of her handbag, looked at them, and put them back. The snick of the catch was very loud. She looked at me. Her hair was a dark cloud surrounding the white oval of her face. "Is there anything you want to tell me, George?" What I wanted to tell her, more than anything, was that my name wasn't George. I had come to dislike that name, almost to hate it. 2 things. The first is that I love you. The second is that I'm not doing anything I'm ashamed of. Oh, and 2A, nothing you'd be ashamed of. Good. That's good. And I love you, George, but I'm going to tell you something if you'll listen. I'll always listen. But she was scaring me. Everything can stay the same for now. While I'm still married to John Clayton, even if it's just on paper and was never properly consummated in the first place, there are things I don't feel I have the right to ask you or of you. Sadie. She put her fingers to my lips. For now. But I won't ever allow another man to put a broom in the bed. Do you understand me? She put a quick kiss where her fingers had been, then dashed up the walk to her door, fumbling for her key. That was how 1962 started for the man who called himself George Amberson. New Year's Day dawned cold and clear, with the forecaster on the morning farm report threatening freezing mist in the lowlands. I had stowed the 2 bugged lamps in my garage. I put one of them in my car and drove to Fort Worth. I thought if there was ever a day when the raggedy-ass carnival on Mercedes Street would be shut down, it was this one. I was right. It was as silent as silent as the Tracker Mausoleum when I dragged Frank Dunning's body into it. Overturned trikes and a few toys lay in balding front yards. Some party boy had left a larger toy, a monstrous old Mercury, parked beside his porch. The car doors were still open. There were a few sad, leftover crepe streamers on the unpaved hardpan of the street and a lot of beer cans, mostly Lone Star, in the gutters. I glanced around at 2706 and saw no one looking out the large front window, but Ivy had been right. Anyone standing there would have a perfect line of sight into the living room of 2703. I parked on the concrete strips that passed for a driveway, as if I had every right to be at the former home of the unlucky Templeton family. I got my lamp and a brand-new toolbox and went to the front door. I had a bad moment when the key refused to work, but it was just new. When I wetted it with some saliva and jiggled it a little, it turned, and I went in. There were 4 rooms, if you counted the bathroom, visible through a door that hung open on one working hinge. The biggest was a combined living room and kitchen. The other 2 were bedrooms. In the larger one, there was no mattress on the bed. I remembered Ivy saying, "Be like taking your dog on vacation, won't it?" In the smaller one, Rosette had drawn Crayola girls on walls where the plaster was decaying and the lathing showed through. They were all wearing green jumpers and big black shoes. They had out-of-proportion pigtails as long as their legs, and many were kicking soccer balls. One had a Miss America tiara perched on her hair and a big old red lipstick smile. The house still smelled faintly of whatever fried meat Ivy had cooked for their final meal before going back to Moselle to live with her mama, her little hellion, and her broke-back husband. This was where Lee and Marina would begin the American phase of their marriage. They'd make love in the bigger of the 2 bedrooms, and he would beat her there. It was where Lee would lie awake after long days, putting together storm doors and wondering why the hell he wasn't famous. Hadn't he tried? Hadn't he tried hard? And in the living room, with its hilly up-and-down floor and its threadbare bile-green carpet, Lee would first meet the man I wasn't supposed to trust, the one that accounted for most, if not all, of the doubts Al had held on to about Oswald's role as the lone gunman. That man's name was George de Mohrenschildt, and I wanted very much to hear what he and Oswald had to say to each other. There was an old bureau on the side of the main room that was closest to the kitchen. The drawers were a jumble of mismatched silverware and crappy cooking utensils. I pulled the bureau away from the wall and saw an electrical socket. Excellent. I put the lamp on top of the bureau and plugged it in. I knew someone might live here a while before the Oswalds moved in, but I didn't think anyone would be apt to take the leaning lamp of Pisa when they decamped. If they did, I had a backup unit in my garage. I drilled a hole through the wall to the outside with my smallest bit, pushed the bureau back into place, and tried the lamp. It worked fine. I packed up and left the house, being careful to lock the door behind me. Then I drove back to Jody. Sadie called and asked me if I would like to come over and have some supper. Just cold cuts, she said, but there was pound cake for dessert if I cared for some. I went over. The dessert was as wonderful as ever, but things weren't the same, because she was right, there was a broom in the bed. Like the Jimla Rosette had seen in the back of my car, it was invisible, but it was there. Invisible or not, it cast a shadow. Sometimes a man and a woman reach a crossroads and linger there, reluctant to take either way, knowing the wrong choice will mean the end, and knowing there's so much worth saving. That's the way it was with Sadie and me during that unrelenting gray winter of 1962. We still went out to dinner once or twice a week, and we still went to the Candlewood bungalows on the occasional Saturday night. Sadie enjoyed sex, and that was one of the things that kept us together. On 3 occasions we shapped hops together. Donald Bellingham was always the DJ, and sooner or later we'd be asked to reprise our first Lindy Hop. Kids always clapped and whistled when we did, not out of politeness either. They were authentically wowed, and some of them started to learn the moves themselves. Were we pleased? Sure, because imitation really is the most sincere form of flattery, but we were never as good as that first time, never so intuitively smooth. Sadie's grace wavered. Once she missed her grip on a flyaway and would have gone sprawling if there hadn't been a couple of husky football players with quick reflexes standing nearby. She laughed it off, but I could see the embarrassment on her face and the reproach, as if it had been my fault, which in a way it was. There was bound to be a blow-up It would have come sooner than it did if not for the Jody Jamboree. That was our greening, a chance to linger a little and think things over before we were forced into a decision neither of us wanted to make. Ellen Doherty came to me in February and asked me 2 things. First, would I please reconsider and sign a contract for the 62-63 school year? And second, would I please direct the junior-senior play again, since last year's had been such a smash hit? I refused both requests, not without a tug of pain. "If it's your book, you'd have all summer to work on it," she coaxed. "It wouldn't be long enough," I said, although at that point I didn't give shit one about the murder place. "Sadie Dunhill says she doesn't believe you care a fig for that novel." It was an insight she hadn't shared with me. It shook me, but I tried not to show it. Sadie doesn't know everything." "The play, then? At least do the play. As long as it doesn't involve nudity, I'll back anything you choose. Given the current composition of the school board and the fact that I myself only have a 2-year contract as principal, that's a mighty big promise. You can dedicate it to Vince Knowles, if you like." "Vince has already had a football season dedicated to his memory, Ellie. I think that's enough." She went away, beaten. The second request came from Mike Kozlaw, who would be graduating in June, and told me he intended to declare a theater major at college. "But I'd really like to do one more play here, with you, Mr. Amberson, because you showed me the way." Unlike Ellie Doherty, he accepted the excuse about my bogus novel without question, which made me feel bad. Terrible, really. For a man who didn't like to lie, who had seen his marriage collapse because of all the ones he'd heard from his "I can stop whenever I want" wife, I was certainly telling a passel of them, as we said in my Jody days. I walked Mike out to the student parking lot where his prized possession was parked, an old Buick sedan with fender skirts, and asked him how his arm felt now that the cast was off. He said it was fine, and he was sure he'd be set for football practice this coming summer. "Although," he said, "if I got cut, it wouldn't break my heart. Then maybe I could do some community theater as well as school stuff. I want to learn everything. Set design, lighting, even costumes." He laughed. "People will start calling me queer." "Concentrate on football, making grades, and not getting too homesick the first semester," I said. "Please, don't screw around." He did a zombie Frankenstein voice. "Yes, master." "How's Bobby Jill?" "Better," he said. "There she is." Bobby Jill was waiting by Mike's Buick. She waved at him, then saw me, and immediately turned away as if interested in the empty football field and the rangeland beyond. It was a gesture everyone in the school had gotten used to. The scar from the accident had healed to a fat red string. She tried to cover it with cosmetics, which only made it more noticeable. Mike said, "I tell her to quit with the powder already. It makes her look like an advertisement for Some's mortuary, but she won't listen. I also tell her I'm not going with her out of pity, or so she won't swallow any more pills. She says she believes me, and maybe she does, on sunny days." I watched him hurry to Bobby Jill, grab her by the waist, and swing her around. I sighed, feeling a little stupid and a lot stubborn. Part of me wanted to do the damn play. Even if it was good for nothing else, it would fill the time while I was waiting for my own show to start. But I didn't want to get hooked into the life of Jody in more ways than I already was. Like any possible long-term future with Sadie, my relationship with the town needed to be on hold. If everything went just right, it was possible I could wind up with the girl, the gold watch, and everything. But I couldn't count on that, no matter how carefully I planned. Even if I succeeded, I might have to run, and if I didn't get away, there was a good chance that my good deed on behalf of the world would be rewarded by life in prison or the electric chair in Huntsville. It was Deke Simmons who finally trapped me into saying yes. He did it by telling me I'd be nuts to even consider it. I should have recognized that as, "Oh, Brer Fox, please don't throw me in that briar patch," shtick. But he was very sly about it, very subtle. A regular Brer Rabbit, you might say. We were in my living room drinking coffee on a Saturday afternoon while some old movie played on my snow-fuzzy TV, Cowboys in Fort Hollywood, standing off 2,000 or so attacking Indians. Outside, more rain was falling. There must have been at least a few sunny days during the winter of '62, but I can't recall any. All I can remember are cold fingers of drizzle always finding their way to the barbered nape of my neck in spite of the turned-up collar of the sheepskin jacket I'd bought to replace the ranch coat. "You don't want to worry about that damn play just because Ellen Dougherty's got her underwear all in a bunch about it," Deke said. "Finish your book, get a bestseller, and never look back. Live the good life in New York. Have a drink with Norman Mailer and Irwin Shaw at the White Horse Tavern." "Uh-huh," I said. John Wayne was blowing a bugle. "I don't think Norman Mailer has to worry too much about me. Irwin Shaw either. Also, you had such a success with Of Mice and Men," he said. "Anything you did as a follow-up would probably be a disappointment by compare—" "Oh, geez, look at that. John Wayne just got an arrow through his hat. Lucky it was the 20-gallon deluxe." I was more miffed by the idea that my second effort might fall short than I should have been. It made me think about how Sadie and I couldn't quite equal our first performance on the dance floor, despite our best efforts. Deke seemed completely absorbed in the TV as he said, "Besides, Ratty Sylvester has expressed an interest in the junior-senior. He's talking about Arsenic and Old Lace. Says he and the wife saw it in Dallas 2 years ago, and it was a regular old knee-slapper." Good God, that chestnut? And Fred Sylvester of the science department as director? I wasn't sure I'd trust Ratty to direct a grammar school fire drill. If a talented but still very damp around the edges actor like Mike Coslaw ended up with Ratty at the helm, it could set his maturing process back 5 years. Ratty and Arsenic and Old Lace? Jesus wept. "There wouldn't be time to put on anything really good anyway," Deke went on. "So I say let Ratty take the fall. I never liked the scurrying little sumbitch anyway." Nobody really liked him, so far as I could tell, except maybe for Mrs. Ratty, who scurried by his side to every school and faculty function wrapped in acres of organdy. But he wouldn't be the one to take the fall. That would be the kids. "They could put on a variety show," I said. "There'd be time enough for that." "Oh, Christ, George, Wallace Beery just took an arrow in the shoulder. I think he's a goner." "Deke?" "No, John Wayne's dragging him to safety. This old shoot-'em-up doesn't make a lick of sense, but I love it, don't you?" "Did you hear what I said?" A commercial came on. Keenan Wynn climbed down off a bulldozer, doffed his hard hat, and told the world he'd walk a mile for a camel. Deke turned to me. "No, I must have missed it." Sly old fox, as if. "I said there'd be time to put on a variety show. A review. Songs, dances, jokes, and a bunch of sketches." "Everything but girls doing the hoochie-coo? Or were you thinking of that, too?" "Don't be a dope." "So that makes it vaudeville. I always liked vaudeville. 'Good night, Mrs. Calabash, wherever you are,' and all that." He dragged his pipe out of the pocket of his cardigan, stuffed it with Prince Albert, and fired it up. "You know, we actually used to do something like that down to the Grange. The show was called Jody Jamboree, but not since the late 40s, though. Folks got a little embarrassed by it, although no one ever came right out and said so. And vaudeville wasn't what we called it." "What are you talking about?" "It was a minstrel show, George. All the cowboys and farmhands joined in. They wore blackface, sang and danced, told jokes in what they imagined was a Negro dialect. and more or less based on Amos and Andy." I began to laugh. "Did anyone play the banjo?" "As a matter of fact, on a couple of occasions our current principal did." "Ellen played the banjo in a minstrel show?" "Careful. You're starting to speak in iambic pentameter. That can lead to delusions of grandeur, pard." I leaned forward. "Tell me one of the jokes." Deke cleared his throat and began speaking in two deep voices. "Say there, Brother Tambo, what did you buy that jar of Vaseline for?" "Well, I believes it was 49 cents. He looked at me expectantly, and I realized that had been the punchline. "Did they laugh?" I almost feared the answer. "Split their guts and hollered for more. You heard those jokes around the square for weeks after." He looked at me solemnly, but his eyes were twinkling like Christmas lights. "We're a small town. Our needs when it comes to humor are quite humble. Our idea of Rabelaisian wit is a blind feller slipping on a banana peel." I sat thinking. The Western came back on, but Deke seemed to have lost interest in it. He was watching me. "That stuff could still work," I said. "George, that stuff always does." It wouldn't need to be funny blackfellers either. "Couldn't do it that way anymore anyway," he said. "Maybe in Louisiana or Alabama, but not on the way to Austin, which the folks at the Slimes Herald call Com Simp City. And you wouldn't want to, would you?" "No. Call me a bleeding heart, but I find the idea repulsive. And why bother? Corny jokes. Boys in big old suits with padded shoulders instead of corn-pone overalls. Girls in knee-high flapper dresses with lots of fringes. I'd love to see what Mike Coslaw could do with a comedy skit." "Oh, he'd kill it," Deke said, as if that were a foregone conclusion. "Pretty good idea. Too bad you don't have time to try it out." I started to say something, but then another of those lightning flashes hit me. It was just as bright as the one that had lit up my brain when Ivy Templeton had said that her neighbors across the street could see into her living room. "George, your mouth is open. The view is good, but not appetizing." "I could make time," I said, "if you could talk Ellie Dougherty into one condition." He got up and snapped off the TV without a single glance, although the fighting between Duke Wayne and the Pawnee Nation had now reached the critical point, with Fort Hollywood burning merry hell in the background. "Name it." I named it, then said, "I've got to talk to Sadie right now." She was solemn at first. Then she began to smile. The smile became a grin, and when I told her the idea that had come to me at the end of my conversation with Deke, she threw her arms around me. But that wasn't good enough for her, so she climbed until she could wrap her legs around me as well. There was no broom between us that day. "It's brilliant. You're a genius. Will you write the script?" "You bet. It won't take long either." Corny old jokes were already flying around in my head. "Coach Borman looked at the orange juice for 20 minutes because the can said concentrate. Our dog had an ingrown tail. We had to x-ray him to find out if he was happy. I rode on a plane so old that one restroom was marked Orville and the other was marked Wilbur. But I need plenty of help with other stuff. What it comes down to is I need a producer. I'm hoping you'll take the job." "Sure." She slipped back to the floor with her body still pressed against mine. This produced a regrettably brief flash of bare leg as her skirt pulled up. She began to pace her living room, smoking furiously. She tripped over the easy chair for probably the 6th or 8th time since we'd been on intimate terms, and caught her balance without even seeming to notice, although she was going to have a pretty fine bruise on her shin by nightfall. "If you're thinking 20s style flapper stuff, I can get Joe Pete to run up the costumes." Joe was the new head of the home ec department, having succeeded to the position when Ellen Dougherty was confirmed as principal. "That's great. Most of the home ec girls love to sew. And to cook! George, we'll need to serve evening meals, won't we? If the rehearsals run extra long, and they will, because we're starting awfully late. Yes, but just sandwiches. Oh, we can do better than that. Lots. And music. We'll need music. It'll have to be recorded because the band could never pull a thing like this together in time. And then together we said, Donald Bellingham, in perfect harmony. What about advertising? I asked. We were starting to sound like Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland getting ready to put on a show in Aunt Millie's barn. Carl Jacoby and his graphic design kids. Posters not just here, but all over town, because we want the whole town to come, not just the relatives of the kids in the show. Standing room only. Bingo, I said, and kissed her nose. I loved her excitement. I was getting pretty excited myself. What do we say about the benefit aspect? Sadie asked. Nothing, until we're sure we can make enough money. We don't want to raise any false hopes. What do you think about taking a run to Dallas with me tomorrow and asking some questions? Tomorrow's Sunday, hon. After school on Monday, maybe even before it's out if you can get period 7 free. I'll get Deke to come out of retirement and cover remedial English, I said. He owes me. Sadie and I went to Dallas on Monday, driving fast to get there before the close of business hours. The office we were looking for turned out to be on Harry Hines Boulevard, not far from Parkland Memorial. There we asked a bushel of questions, and Sadie gave a brief demonstration of what we were after. The answers were more than satisfactory, and 2 days later I began my second-to-last showbiz venture as director of Jody Jamboree, an all-new, all-hilarious vaudeville song and dance show, and all to benefit a good cause. We didn't say what that cause was, and nobody asked. 2 things about the Land of a Go. There's a lot less paperwork, and a hell of a lot more trust. Everybody in town did turn out, and Deke Simmons was right about one thing. Those lame jokes never seemed to get old, not 1,500 miles from Broadway at least. In the persons of Jim Ledoux, who wasn't bad and could actually sing a little, and Mike Koslaw, who was flat-out hilarious, our show was more Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis than Mr. Bones and Mr. Tambo. The skits were of the knockabout type, and with a couple of athletes to perform them, they worked better than they probably had a right to. In the audience, knees were slapped and buttons were busted. Probably a few girdles were popped as well. Ellen Doherty dragged her banjo out of retirement. For a lady with blue hair, she played a mean breakdown. And there was Hoochie Coo after all. Mike and Jim persuaded the rest of the football team to perform a spirited can-can, wearing petticoats and bloomers down south and nothing but skin up north. Joe Pete found wigs for them and they stopped the show. The town ladies seemed especially crazy about those bare-chested young men, wigs and all. For the finale, the entire cast paired off and filled the gymnasium stage with frenetic swing dancing as In the Mood blared from the speakers. Skirts flew, feet flashed, football players, now dressed in zoot suits and stingy brim hats, spun limber girls. Most of the latter were cheerleaders who already knew a few things about how to cut a rug. The music ended. The laughing, winded cast stepped forward to take their bows, and as the audience rose to its feet for the 3rd or maybe it was the 4th time since the curtain went up, Donald started up In the Mood again. This time the boys and girls scampered to opposite sides of the stage, grabbed the dozens of cream pies waiting for them on tables in the wings, and began to pelt each other. The audience roared its approval. This part of the show our cast had known about and looked forward to, although since no actual pies had been flung during rehearsals, I wasn't sure how it would play out. Of course, it went splendidly, as cream pie fights always do. So far as the kids knew, this was the climax. But I had one more trick up my sleeve. As they came forward to take their second bows, faces dripping cream and costumes splattered, In the Mood started up for the 3rd time. Most of the kids looked around puzzled, and so did not see the faculty row rise to its feet holding the cream pies Sadie and I had stashed beneath their seats. The pies flew and the cast was doused for the second time. Coach Borman had 2 pies, and his aim was deadly. He got both his quarterback and his star defense man. Mike Kozloff, face dripping cream, began to bellow, "Mr. A, Miss D! Mr. A, Miss D!" The rest of the cast took it up, then the audience clapping in rhythm. We went up on stage hand in hand, and Bellingham started that goddamn record yet again. The kids formed lines on either side of us shouting, "Dance! Dance! Dance!" We had no choice, and although I was convinced my girlfriend would go sliding in all that cream and break her neck, we were perfect for the first time since the Sadie Hawkins. At the end of it, I squeezed both of Sadie's hands, saw her little nod, "Go on, go for it, I trust you," and shot her between my legs. Both of her shoes flew into the first row, her skirt skidded deliriously up her thighs, and she came magically to her feet in one piece, with her hands first held out to the audience, which was going insane, and then to the sides of her cream-smeared skirt in a ladylike curtsy. The kids turned out to have a trick up their sleeves as well, one almost certainly instigated by Mike Kozloff, although he would never own up to it. They had saved some pies back, and as we stood there soaking up the applause, we were hit by at least a dozen flying from all directions. And the crowd, as they say, goes wild. Sadie pulled my ear close to her mouth, wiped whipped cream from it with her pinky, and whispered, "How can you leave all this?" And it still wasn't over. Deke and Ellen walked to center stage, finding their way almost magically around the streaks, splatters, and clots of cream. No one would have dreamed of tossing a cream pie at either of them. Deke raised his hands for silence, and when Ellen Doherty stepped forward, she spoke in a clear classroom voice that carried easily over the murmurs and residual laughter. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's performance of Jody Jamboree will be followed by 3 more. This brought another wave of applause. "These are benefit performances," Ellie went on when the applause died down. "And it pleases me, yes, it pleases me very much, to tell you to whom the benefit will accrue. Last fall, we lost one of our valued students, and we all mourned the passing of Vincent Knowles, which came far, far, far too soon." Now there was dead silence from the audience. "A girl you all know, one of the leading lights of our student body, was badly scarred in that accident. Mr. Amberson and Miss Dunhill have arranged for Roberta Jillian Allnut to have facial reconstructive surgery this June in Dallas. There will be no cost to the Allnut family. I'm told by Mr. Sylvester, who has served as the Jody Jamboree accountant, that Bobby Jill's classmates and this town have assured that all the costs of the surgery will be paid in full." There was a moment of quiet as they processed this. Then they leaped to their feet. The applause was like summer thunder. I saw Bobby Jill herself on the bleachers. She was weeping with her hands over her face. Her parents had their arms around her. This was one night in a small town, one of those burgs off the main road that nobody cares about much except for the people who live there. And that's okay, because they care. I looked at Bobby Jill, sobbing into her hands. I looked at Sadie. There was cream in her hair. She smiled. So did I. She mouthed, "I love you, George." I mouthed back, "I love you too." That night, I loved all of them, and myself for being with them. I never felt so alive or happy to be alive. How could I leave all this indeed? The blow-up came 2 weeks later. It was a Saturday, grocery day, Sadie and I had gotten into the habit of doing it together at Wine Gardens on Highway 77. We'd push our carts companionably side by side while Montavani played overhead, examining the fruit and looking for the best buys on meat. You could get almost any kind of cut you wanted, as long as it was beef or chicken. It was okay with me. Even after nearly 3 years, I was still wowed by the rock-bottom prices. That day I had something other than groceries on my mind. The Hazard family living at 2706 Mercedes, a shotgun shack across the street and a little to the left of the rotting duplex that Lee Oswald would soon call home. Jody Jamboree had kept me very busy, but I'd managed 3 trips back to Mercedes Street that spring. I parked my Ford in a lot in downtown Fort Worth and took the Winscott Road bus, which stopped less than half a mile away. On these trips I dressed in jeans, scuffed boots, and a faded denim jacket I'd picked up at a yard sale. My story, if anyone asked for it, I was looking for a cheap rent because I'd just gotten a night watchman job at Texas Sheet Metal in West Fort Worth. That made me a trustworthy individual as long as no one checked up, and supplied a reason why the house would be quiet with the shades drawn during the daylight hours. On my strolls up Mercedes Street to the Monkey Ward warehouse and back, always with a newspaper folded open to the rental section of the classifieds, I spotted Mr. Hazard, a hulk in his mid-30s, the 2 kids Rosette wouldn't play with, and an old woman with a frozen face who dragged one foot as she walked. Hazard's mama eyed me suspiciously from the mailbox on one occasion as I idled slowly past along the rut that served as a sidewalk, but she didn't speak. On my 3rd recon, I saw a rusty old trailer hooked to the back of Hazard's pickup truck. He and the kids were loading it with boxes while the old lady stood nearby on the just greening crabgrass, leaning on her cane and wearing a stroke sneer that could have masked any emotion. I was betting on utter indifference. What I felt was happiness. The Hazards were moving on. As soon as they did, a working stiff named George Amberson was going to rent 2706. The important thing was to make sure I was first in line. I was trying to figure out if there was any foolproof way to do that as we went about our Saturday shopping chores. On one level, I was responding to Sadie, making the right comments, kidding her when she spent too much time at the dairy case, pushing the cart loaded with groceries out to the parking lot, putting the bags in the Ford's trunk. But I was doing it all on autopilot, most of my mind worrying over the Fort Worth logistics, and that turned out to be my undoing. I wasn't paying attention to what was coming out of my mouth. And when you're living a double life, that's dangerous. As I drove back to Sadie's place with her sitting quietly, too quietly, beside me, I was singing, because the Ford's radio was on the fritz. The valves had gotten wheezy too. The Sunliner still looked snappy, and I was attached to it for all sorts of reasons, but it was 7 years downstream from the assembly line, and there were over 90,000 miles on the clock. I carried Sadie's groceries into the kitchen in a single load, making heroic grunting noises and staggering for effect. I didn't notice that she wasn't smiling, and had no idea that our little period of greening was over. I was still thinking about Mercedes Street and wondering what kind of a show I'd have to put on there, or rather, how much of a show. It would be delicate. I wanted to be a familiar face because familiarity breeds disinterest as well as contempt, but I didn't want to stand out. Then there were the Oswalds. She didn't speak English, and he was a cold fish by nature, all to the good, but 2706 was still awfully close. The past might be obdurate, but the future was delicate. A house of cards, and I had to be very careful not to change it until I was ready, so I'd have to... That was when Sadie spoke to me, and shortly after that, life, as I had come to know it and love it, in Jody came crashing down. "George, can you come in the living room? I want to talk to you." "Hadn't you better put your hamburger and pork chops in the fridge? And I think I saw ice cream." "Let it melt!" she shouted, and that brought me out of my head in a hurry. I turned to her, but she was already in the living room. She picked up her cigarettes from the table beside the couch and lit one. At my gentle urging, she had been trying to cut down, at least around me, and this seemed somehow more ominous than her raised voice. I went into the living room. "What is it, honey? What's wrong?" "Everything." "What was that song?" Her face was pale and set. She held the cigarette in front of her mouth like a shield. I began to realize that I had slipped up, but I didn't know how or when, and that was scary. "I don't know what you're... The song you were singing in the car when we were coming home. The one you were bellowing at the top of your lungs." I tried to remember and couldn't. All I could remember was thinking I'd always have to dress like a slightly down-on-his-luck workman on Mercedes Street so I'd fit in. Sure, I'd been singing, but I often did when I was thinking about other things. Doesn't everybody? Just some pop thing I heard on K-Life, I guess. Something that got into my head. You know how songs do that. I don't understand what's got you so upset. Something you heard on K-Life, with lyrics like "I met a gin-soaked barroom queen in Memphis. She tried to take me upstairs for a ride." It wasn't just my heart that sank. Everything below my neck seemed to drop 5 inches. Honky-tonk women. That's what I'd been singing. A song that wouldn't be recorded for another 7 or 8 years by a group that wouldn't even have an American hit for another 3. My mind had been on other things, but still, how could I have been so dumb? She blew my nose, and then she blew my mind? On the radio? The FCC would shut down a station that played something like that. I started to get angry then, mostly at myself, but not entirely at myself. I was walking a goddamn tightrope, and she was shouting at me over a Rolling Stones tune. Chill, Sadie, it's just a song. I don't know where I heard it. That's a lie, and we both know it. You're freaking out. I think maybe I better take my groceries and head home. I tried to keep my voice calm. The sound of it was very familiar. It was the way I'd always tried to speak to Christy when she came home with a snoot full. Skirt on crooked, blouse half untucked, hair all crazy. Not to mention the smeared lipstick. From the rim of a glass or from some fellow barfly's lips. Just thinking about it made me angrier. Wrong again, I thought. I didn't know if I meant Sadie or Christy or me. At that moment, I didn't care. We never get so mad as when we get caught, do we? I think maybe you better tell me where you heard that song if you ever want to come back here. And where you heard what you said to the kid at the checkout when he said he'd double-bag your chicken so it wouldn't leak. I don't have any idea. Excellent, dude. That's what you said? I think maybe you better tell me where you heard that. And kick out the jams. And boogie shoes. And shake your booty. Chill. And freaking out. I want to know where you heard those, too. Why you say them and no one else does. I want to know why you were so scared of that stupid Jimla chant that you talked about in your sleep. I want to know where Derry is and why it's like Dallas. I want to know when you were married and to who and for how long. I want to know where you were before you were in Florida because Ellie Dougherty says she doesn't know. That some of your references are fake, appear to be fanciful, is how she put it. I was sure Ellen hadn't found out from Deke, but she had found out. I actually wasn't too surprised, but I was infuriated that she had blabbed to Sadie. She had no right to tell you that. She smashed out her cigarette, then shook her hand as bits of live coal jumped up and stung it. Sometimes it's like you're from... I don't know, some other universe. One where they sing about screwing drunk women from Memphis. I tried to tell myself all that doesn't matter, that love conquers all, except it doesn't. It doesn't conquer lies. Her voice wavered, but she didn't cry, and her eyes stayed fixed on mine. If there had only been anger in them, it would have been a little easier, but there was pleading, too. Sadie, if you'd only—" "I won't! Not anymore. So don't start up with the stuff about how you're not doing anything you're ashamed of, and I wouldn't be either. Those are things I need to decide for myself. It comes down to this: either the broom goes or you'll have to." "If you knew, you wouldn't—" "Then tell me." "I can't!" The anger popped like a pricked balloon, leaving an emotional dullness behind. I dropped my eyes from her set face, and they happened to fall on her desk. What I saw there stopped my breath. It was a little pile of job applications for her time in Reno this coming summer. The top one was from Harrah's Hotel and Casino. On the first line, she'd printed her name in neat block letters. Her full name, including the middle one I'd never thought to ask her about. I reached down very slowly and put my thumbs over her first name and the second syllable of her last name. What that left was Doris Dunn. I remembered the day I had spoken to Frank Dunning's wife, pretending to be a real estate speculator with an interest in the West Side wreck. She'd been 20 years older than Sadie Doris Clayton, née Dunhill, but both women had blue eyes, exquisite skin, and fine, full-breasted figures. Both women were smokers. All of it could have been coincidental, but it wasn't, and I knew it. "What are you doing?" The accusatory tone meant the real question was, why do you keep dodging and evading? But I was no longer angry, not even close. "Are you sure he doesn't know where you are?" I asked. "Who? Johnny? Do you mean Johnny? Why?" That was when she decided it was useless. I saw it in her face. "George, you need to leave." "But he could find out," I said, "because your parents know, and your parents thought he was just the bee's knees. You said so yourself." I took a step toward her. She took a step back, the way you'd step back from a person who's revealed himself to be of unsound mind. I saw the fear in her eyes and the lack of comprehension, and still I couldn't stop. Remember that I was scared myself. Even if you told them not to say, he'd get it out of them because he's charming. Isn't he, Sadie? When he's not compulsively washing his hands or alphabetizing his books or talking about how disgusting it is to get an erection, he's very, very charming. He certainly charmed you. Please go away, George. Her voice was trembling. I took another step toward her instead. She took a compensatory step back, struck the wall, and cringed. Seeing her do that was like a slap across the face to a hysteric, or a glass of cold water flung into the face of a sleepwalker. I retreated to the arch between the living room and the kitchen, my hands held up to the sides of my face like a man surrendering, which was what I was doing. I'm going. But Sadie, I just don't understand how you could do it, she said. The tears had come. They were rolling slowly down her cheeks. Or why you refused to undo it. We had such a good thing. We still do. She shook her head. She did it slowly but firmly. I crossed the kitchen in what felt like a float rather than a walk, plucked the tub of vanilla ice cream from one of the bags standing on the counter, and put it in the freezer of her cold spot. Part of me was thinking this was all just a bad dream and I'd wake up soon. Most of me knew better. Sadie stood in the arch watching me. She had a fresh cigarette in one hand and the job applications in the other. Now that I saw it, the resemblance to Doris Dunning was eerie, which raised the question of why I hadn't seen it before. Because I'd been preoccupied with other stuff? Or was it because I still hadn't fully grasped the immensity of the things I was fooling with? I went out through the screen door and stood on the stoop, looking at her through the mesh. Watch out for him, Sadie. Johnny's mixed up about a lot of things, but he's not dangerous, she said. And my parents would never tell him where I am. They promised. People can break promises and people can snap, especially people who've been under a lot of pressure and are mentally unstable to begin with. You need to go, George. Promise me that you'll watch out for him, and I will. She shouted, I promise! I promise! I promise! The way her cigarette trembled between her fingers was bad. The combination of shock, loss, grief, and anger in her red eyes was much worse. I could feel them following me all the way back to my car. Goddamned Rolling Stones.